Okay, excellent. Akshay, can I also request you to make Vikas and Gayatri co-host as well?
Okay, sir.
Gayatri Girish and Vikas Gelot as well, please.
Vikas Galhot, no, sir?
Gelot, yeah, that's right. Because we'll have quite a few speakers who are joining us.
Next is sir, Gayatri,
So
yeah?
Gayatri Girish.
Yes, done, sir. Both are co, sir.
Oh, excellent, excellent. Thank you,
Thank
Akshay.
you.
And ladies and gentlemen, we are ready to start this workshop. It's over to my colleague, Gayatri Girish.
Good morning, everyone. Am I audible? So we are here today for a workshop on environment, social governance in energy law, sector law and policy. So this is a two-day workshop conducted by NPTL in collaboration with the CEERA-NLSIU. So this workshop is of a very high importance considering the situation that we are in, the global situation of environment, the business, making it so relevant that we have this workshop. And welcome to all the participants who have shown such interest in and joined in such large numbers to be a part of this workshop. This workshop is for 2 days, that is on Saturday and Sunday from 10 to 1. And the topics are of very diverse and elaborate sessions are being conducted so that all of you get a very deep and insight about the workshop. The topics, as I already said, the topic is of high importance. So we start with the first session. That is, we have two speakers for this first session. And the first session is on about business law and energy sector. Initially, we would when we kind of make an arrangement to the topics, it's so important that the following topics are also very important, one after the other. So the conduct of the schedule is being made in such a way that all of you have a very connecting towards the topic. So we start with the first speaker. May I introduce the two speakers of this session? Professor Sairam Bhatt is the co-director of CEERA National Law School, and he's been in the field of study on environment and energy for more than 25 years, and his vast experience would will certainly give you a deeper insight on the energy sector and the environment social governance. We welcome you, sir. Along with Professor Sairam Bhatt is a senior research associate of CEERA, Vikas Gehlot. He is also a very senior and esteemed researcher in the field of energy law and environment. To his credit, he has a lot of journal articles and also been a very important part of research activities in CEERA. We welcome you, Vikas. Sir, the floor is yours.
Gayatri. Ladies and gentlemen, let me take this opportunity to recognize, welcome, and acknowledge all the resource persons who have agreed to be with us during this workshop. We have very eminent scholars, researchers, and industry experts who are here. So I'm very grateful personally as well as institutionally for their extension of support. They have agreed to be here, and it's a weekend. While for our participants, it may be very convenient for weekend. For a lot of us, giving this time is, I think, very, very crucial. And hence, my deep sense of appreciation to each one of them who have extended this support. Let me start with Raj Singh, who will be speaking tomorrow morning, YG Muralidharan. We have Pavitra, Raghav, Ragya, Gayatri KK, Rohit, Vikas, Jay, and Gayatri Girish. So all of you, thank you so much for joining us. For many of you, it's a homecoming to join a session with CEERA. But nevertheless, I think bringing your levels of expertise in your research and in your practice over to the table in this workshop becomes very critical. Coming to the participants, friends, if you see the design of this workshop, we have brought in a lot of resources. Some of them are very core specialized presentations, and hence in these 5 or 6 hours of this workshop today and tomorrow, I would encourage you to interact. Okay, so this is not going to be a one-way traffic kind of a workshop. So it's not, though it's going to be online, We will, ask you to use the chat box, ask queries, questions, share your insights and inputs, because we want to also learn from you. So many of you may be from the industry, many of you may be from the field, many of you may be fellow researchers. So please share your insights as well, because I think this is a mutually beneficial workshop. I think we would want to learn from you, and you would also want to take something away from us, right? So please feel free to interact, keep this session lively, and I'm thank you to all of you, because I think we have more than now 120 people who have subscribed to this workshop, but I think some of them will join on the way, right? So with this, me and Vikas will be, taking this session forward. I will start with my presentation, which I'm sharing it right now on the screen. So, friends, at the Center for Environmental Law Education Research and Advocacy, National Law School of India, University, Bangalore, we call this center as CEERA. We think we are one of the premier centers in the field of environmental law. And over a period of the last decade or so, we have ventured into energy and environment. And this is an area that we are very keen to work on. Now, the energy sector in India, friends, as you all understand, is a very important sector, right? Why do you think it's important? Can a couple of you interact on the chat box? Because see, we have a lot of people. So if I ask you to unmute, it will become slightly a challenge. Okay. So can someone say why the energy sector is important in India or in any economy per se? Do you think it's important? Because see, today we'll have to talk about two things: energy and ESG, right? You must be asking, sir, why are we talking about ESG in energy? Why don't you just speak about energy? Or some of you saying, why don't you speak broadly about just ESG, right? Why energy sector? What's energy doing? Lifeline of an economy. Okay, Amjad. Wow. Yes, energy drives the economy. Okay, 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 okay. Excellent, excellent. Right, right. Wow, wow. I'm so encouraged by the responses in the chat box. So we have a very vibrant start to the workshop, right? You all are keen to contribute and keen to share your insights. It's excellent, excellent. Okay, so first and the foremost, friends, this is important for me to lay down the context of what we are trying to speak today. First and foremost, friends, we'll have to understand the distinction between energy and electricity. Am I making some sense? Okay. So, yes. So, interestingly, I think energy is, it's a broader sector. And when we talk about energy, it could be, the various aspects that contribute to the economy. Whereas electricity or power is some kind of source that drives a particular economy. Both drive a particular economy, right? But the sources of energy could be different, and the sources of electricity can be also different. Now, the reason why we talk about these two is because sometimes when we say energy, energy encompasses power. No doubt, energy encompasses electricity, but electricity does not necessarily encompass the energy sector. Though we say through power you get, energy. So I think the distinction between these two are very critical and important, because when you talk about electricity, the law, the policy, and the regulator will be crucial. But when we speak about the energy sector, please note the law, the policy, the management, and the regulator may be entirely different. Do you understand this? Right? So we have an act called the Electricity Act of 2003. It's a very important piece of legislation. Go to the title of this legislation. I think it is very clear. It is electricity. And through this, act, we have created a regulator called CERC, that is the Central Electricity Regulatory Commission and the State Electricity Regulatory Commissions. I think what we do is we burn fossil fuel. We may use the renewable sector to generate electricity, and that electricity is propelling the system, the online thing that we are doing today. So electricity sector is probably one sector that has clear regulations. The energy sector, interestingly, does not have uniform regulations because it is divided in different ministries. The Ministry of Petroleum, in terms of crude oil, could be one sector that is contributing to the energy sector. Two, it could be the Ministry of Coal that could be actually enhancing coal extraction as well. You could think of, the Director General of Hydrocarbons, which is looking into natural gas or other mechanisms that may be contributing to energy. So you have to understand that energy is different, electricity is different, right? We have to be very clear. Of course, today when we talk about ESG, that is environment, social governance, why do we speak broadly to energy is because if the foundational bedrock of electricity or power has ESG, then you assume that the final, final outcome also has ESG, right? So these are important. Screen is not moving. There is a dark spot. Okay. Does it sound better now? Does it show better? Or should I reshare? There is nothing on the slide. It is just, I'm just starting. So you can relax.
सर
Okay.
सर आपको पिन करेगा तो सर वी विल एबल टू सी यू सर
मेरे को पिन करेगा तो I'll be able to see you. Okay. Okay. Fine. Okay. Thank you. Okay. That looks great. Okay. Right. So with this distinction, we'll go forward. And I think one of the important aspects that we'll all have to discuss now is why ESG in energy, right? Why are we talking about these three parameters in the energy sector? Friends, if you understand that India is a signatory to the Paris Agreement, and climate change is a real problem. So if we do not, deal with this challenge of climate change, then we'll be actually having a lot of issues on human rights. So I think India is already quite a vulnerable country that faces adverse impact on climate change. We are very vulnerable. You see that happening with glaciers being, falling. There is cloudburst, there are unprecedented rainfall. So a lot of disasters are occurring in this country, not only here, but I think in elsewhere of the world. And climate change is a reality. And to be honest, friends, one of the major sectors that is contributing to adverse climate impact is the energy sector. So to be honest, if we have to deal with climate, at the bottom of the pyramid is the energy sector. This is the major contributor to climate change, right? Don't think that, oh, what are the other sectors not doing? But please note, the energy sector is the most important responsible sector that has changed the climate. If the earth is warmer today by 1.5 degrees, if it is going to reach 2 degrees and it's going to be unbearable, and please note, this is the only planet that exists not only for human beings, for other species. The energy sector has unfortunately critically made adverse contribution. So this is where on the bottom of the pyramid, if we have to save this planet, the energy sector has to change, right? The energy sector has to take responsibility. Historically, it is the energy sector that has contributed maximum to climate change. Historically, even today, if you take all sectors into account and energy, please note the energy sector's contribution is the biggest contribution to the adverse impact that is climate change. So this sector ought to take that responsibility. This sector has to go transition. This sector has to transform itself. If it does not do so, I think we are at the brink of almost life extinction for a lot of species already, but it could end up for human beings as well, right? So this is the raw justification that is there about why we should have ESG or the discussion on ESG in the energy sector. Okay, so if we move forward, friends, what do you think should be the answer for the first question? What should the energy sector try to do? Should it try to decarbonize or should it try to uh, low carbonize? Okay, there are only few. Okay, great. Now it's coming. Okay, great. Great. Keep it coming. That's good. So, when you interact, I think you are also in participative mode, isn't it? Right? Decarbonize. See, friends, decarbonization and low carbonization, I think these are two choices that are there. But to be honest, can the energy sector ever be decarbonized entirely? Can you stay without fossil fuels, right? From the use of it. For example, we are using fossil fuel in automobile. See, at one point of time, we had said that automobiles can be completely electric. But is that an option? Do you think that's a good option? Because please note, friends, today, as we speak about EVs or electric mobility, and we think that the vehicular sector can be decarbonized. To be honest, China and today's Times of India has this very interesting, article. China is the country that controls mostly 80% of the rare minerals that go into EVs, right? India is yet to gain footprints over here, and China controls the entire market, to be honest, right from the access to the minerals and also the processing of the same. So, we are quite dependent upon other countries in case we are even thinking of decarbonization. To be honest, the kind of crude oil import that we do into the country itself is a kind of a dependency factor. So, please note right now, while we talk about the responsibility of the energy sector in ESG, we are talking of kind of a timeline where we want the energy sector to be in transition. We are saying that there should be a shift, and in that shift, we can only attempt a low carbonized economy. We can try and hope that the energy sector does not contribute as much as it did before 2005, and that's what the government of India has put its target as, that whatever carbon emissions were coming from the energy sector up to 2005, we will actually lower it by 45% by 2030. This is a target that the government of India has actually put upon itself. So, low carbon economy is something that the energy sector should target, because to be honest, friends, it is important for the energy sector to actually start thinking, how do we look at this transition, right? Transition from what we are currently doing to what we can do much better in the ESG phenomenon. Now, please note, while we talk about the energy sector, it's not just the private sector that is responsible. In India, to be honest, before 2003, the energy sector was very dominant by public sector. Even today, if you ask me, is the energy sector dominant by public sector? Who is dominating the energy sector, public or private? Who has a major share in the low carbon economy? Public. Yes, but I would say it is the public-private partnership in the energy sector that will drive the low carbon economy. I think both have to come together, right? Of course, historically, it is the public sector in India that had taken the responsibility of providing you energy, but right now, through privatization and public-private partnership, this responsibility has to be a shared responsibility. The private sector can bring in investment, it can bring in technology, it can take the responsibility much better than what can the government do. So I think it is a joint initiative of citizens and the government that will only change the economy and India's responsibility globally. Because globally, please note, while we say that India is targeting to be a developed economy by 2047, we are looking at Viksit Bharat, aren't we? Yes. Now, a developed Bharat or a developed India has to be responsible India, responsible internationally. If you are attaining, say, we want a permanent seat in the Security Council, what kind of responsibility can we show in climate action, right? How can India lead the world in decarbonization, both politically and environmentally? I think this is precisely where India has a major role to play. And I think each one of us has to contribute in this process. Now, friends, what do we do in terms of ESG, right? A lot of people probably have not understood E, S, and G. Now, I want to ask some of you, because some of you are from the industry. This is a question for you. Okay, so please use the chat box. Does your company do any of the following? Okay, so you have to answer this. Can you? Because this is a workshop, don't worry. You can frankly and clearly take part. Okay. Now, E, friends, environment stands for protecting the planet. Right. Now, do our energy companies have a target for going net zero? I repeat, do our companies, any energy company, okay, be it Coal India, be it NTPC, be it whatever IRDA, any company, do we have a net zero target? If so, let me ask you, by when are these companies willing to go and achieve net zero? 2070 is the target for the country. That is what the government has promised under the Paris Agreement, that we will achieve and go to being a net zero country by 2070 as a country, right? But is that applicable to also the energy companies? Or could the energy companies at the bottom of the pyramid actually happen to go net zero before the country can go net zero? Do you understand what I'm trying to say? See, if energy is at net zero, then the processes that use the energy can only achieve net zero by them. That's why I said energy companies are at the bottom of the pyramid of the economy. They are the drivers of the economy. If energy is green, the processes, the products, the services that flow from those kinds of energy can also easily achieve net zero target. So how many of us know about the declaration that, see, if a country has to achieve net zero, see, country is driven by whom? It is driven by individual citizens and corporate citizens. So what are corporate energy citizens doing in terms of saving the planet, protecting the planet, and trying to bring about energy transition? Friends, there are various mechanisms to achieve the same, right? And today, interestingly, ESG consultants precisely do the same. There is a great new market for what I call as green skill jobs. Green skill jobs, right? Now, green skill jobs means actually you are actually someone who tells a company how it can actually get into a low carbon net zero process. And hence, friends, can energy companies, start reducing their carbon footprints? Can this be one of the small, simple steps towards achieving E in the ESG? What do you think? Can we reduce our carbon footprints? Can companies do the same? Can this be the first step in E of the ESG? Friends, please think about this, because carbon footprint that companies do, for example, some of us may be traveling to the World Economic Forum in Davos in Switzerland. How many of the corporate leaders are in Davos? How many did go to Davos and go to the meeting? Is it necessary for you to fly to Davos in a jet plane, attend this meeting, and then come back and then talk about net zero or low carbon economy? You're getting what I'm trying to drive you to think about? Friends, the aviation industry, unfortunately, is not yet to, rather, it is yet to start its responsibility in climate action. There are two sectors, friends. While the automobile sector has already gone into a transition phase, Raghav will tell you more about it. The shipping industry and the aviation industry are just catching up to their responsibility under climate action. They're just catching up. And hence, if I am a responsible corporate citizen, then I will look at reducing my carbon footprint as the first mechanism to achieving E. And please note, when you talk about BRSR, and which Pavitra will be dealing with, I think I have to say that in the last year, how many flights did we take? How many kilometers did we cover? And can the company reduce them in the next coming year? That could be the simple mechanism of achieving E in the ESG. Do you agree with me? I'm just asking you. Do you agree with me? See, friends, there can be big ideas, there can be small ideas, right? So let's start with something very small, something that is achievable by the energy companies, by say Coal India Limited. I'm just naming this as an idea of reducing carbon footprint. Secondly, you will notice that companies have been looking forward for energy efficiency. To be honest, friends, energy efficient buildings are something that Indians are yet to actually cater to. Forget, what is the fossil fuel and which is whether you have a DG set on diesel or not. The point is, friends, if you look at energy efficiency, it is a great way to contribute towards E in the ESG. As an energy company, can you look at energy efficiency in your processes, productions, and your buildings? So I think there are so many mechanisms in which companies can contribute to the planet, to saving of the planet. And I think this is not just for energy companies, but it is also for every kind of businesses that may have a responsibility to go carbon net neutral, right? Gayatri probably is going to talk to you about, why we are now looking at waste resource recovery, right? Because please note, friends, if you reduce, reuse, and recycle energy per se, that itself is a great contribution to E in the ESG, right? So waste recovery is also critical and important, right? And finally, can you look at environmental impact? So I think E stands for environment. It stands for a very critical contribution of responsibility towards the environment by energy sector per se, right? Be it extraction sector, be it exploration sector, or be it the distribution sector, any sector in the energy space will have to have environmental responsibility. And this can be done through various mandates as well. Now, coming to S in the ESG. Friends, S stands for people, right? Is social responsibility of companies critical in its governance? And should this be actually something that is mandated? Friends, to be honest, the social or the people's responsibility of companies are something that a lot of companies have worked towards. But while the environmental regulatory concept is clear, the social regulatory concept is not that very clear. What are companies supposed to do, right? This is quite vague in most jurisdictions. It's quite fluid also in the Indian context. However, you will notice that S also becomes critical because it's the people that you're driving to, right? I think the responsibility towards people is critical and important, right? So how do companies deal with, either workers or the society also becomes quite an important factor. And in this, probably one of the elements that I have to tell you is about, okay, if some of you are working in an energy sector, do you face occupational health challenges? Are companies taking responsibility for OHS? Should they? Is there a law that protects workers from OHS? Friends, a couple of years back, workers who were working in nearly 130 thermal power stations. Now, thermal power uses what? Coal. Coal is burnt. And unfortunately, what comes out, what can be the consequences of burning of coal? Yeah, it is 100% dust. Fly ash, Sunil. Okay, yeah, fly ash or ash as you want to call it. Yes, you're right. So the workers who are working in thermal power station, they actually filed a petition in the Supreme Court, and Vikas and Gayatri should know this. It's a very interesting judgment because that was delivered by Justice K.S. Radhakrishnan, the one of the green judges who developed the ecocentric approach, right? And they claimed that working in thermal power stations is actually injurious to their health. And interestingly, all of these were, public sector thermal power stations. It's only quite recently you have, thermal power stations in the private sector, but these were all traditional thermal power stations, which unfortunately, as you all know, thermal power stations have a life. They may have to be decommissioned after a certain period of time. So technology has to change Of course, there are a lot of regulations on how to utilize fly ash, how to reduce it, but workers who are working. So I think the aspect of a S in ESG means that is a company taking responsibility towards the workers, the society, and towards their well-being, right? So I think while the labor law wanted to bring in a code for occupational health and safety, it is not yet been implemented. So I think companies have to now start taking this responsibility because, to be honest, if energy has to be exported from India, is there a possibility of energy getting exported from India? Where is India between import and export of energy? Are we more an importing country right now? Are we more an importing country right now? Yes, you are talking of deficit. Yeah, that's right. So can there be a stage where we may want to export energy at some point of time? To be honest, friends, if India would think about exporting energy at any given point of time, then unfortunately, if companies do not comply with ESG, we will not have the ability to export. Most countries across the world are having stringent norms, especially Europe is leading the way in giving directives and norms as regarding ESG. And S stands for Europe standards, including slavery, including work-life balance. It includes many aspects for them in the aspect of S. So please know, while we talk about business and the responsibility of business towards human rights, S actually holds this kind of accountability of businesses towards human rights, right? So companies will have to have clear strategy to look at S in the ESG as well. Finally, friends, what does G stand for? Anyone? Of course, G stands for governance, profits. Okay. Okay. Yes, governance and reporting. Siddhant, very good. Siddhant Banerjee. I like that, Siddhant. Very good. Managing stakeholders. Very good. Yes, yes, yes. Excellent. Oversight, policy. Wow, that's excellent. Very nice. But I would say governance here, or G, stands for prosperity, right? So prosperity of organizations mean that how good you are ethically in reporting your business, in complying with government regulations. Now, friends, governance will ensure prosperity. That's what, I would like to state over here. But how many of you know about a concept called EPR, Extended Producer's Responsibility? Have you heard about this by any chance? Yes, Sunil, couple of you. Does this apply to energy sector? If so, which sector does extended producer's responsibility apply? Plastics, Vaibhav, you're right. Electronics and batteries, polluter principle. Okay. Solar PV, Shivan Pandey. Shivam, you're absolutely right. Rakya also is right. Friends, please note extended producer's responsibility is there in several waste management laws. We started the extended producer's responsibility with batteries waste. We then brought it to electronic and electrical waste. We extended it to plastic waste as well. And you will notice, friends, it also applies to the solar panels. So in 2022, the government of India has come up with a notification that solar companies will have to take EPR certificates. See, you have to know that renewable energy is supposed to be better than non-renewables. However, when you talk about renewable energy, do we apply ESG even to the renewable sector? Do the renewable sector also have to comply with ESG? You may say, yes, they are green sectors, right? Interestingly, many of you will be happy to know that some of the solar, sector initially were categorized as white. Now we call them blue under environmental law, right? So many of these energy companies will have to have responsibility to ensure that though they are a white category industry or a blue category industry, they comply with the governance regulatory norms that are required from time to time, right? So see, India does not have the technology entirely for solar panels. We are actually trying to do the same. the government has extended the PLI scheme, that is product linked incentive scheme, to produce solar. We are dependent upon China, but EPR becomes a very critical factor of the responsibility of these solar companies as well. So I think, of course, diversity in board, reporting, supply chain, ethical values, all these does come within the aspect of G in ESG. So it is planet, people, and prosperity. That is the entire process in which energy companies have to take responsibility, and this is what is being attempted under the law. So, friends, the next question is very important. There is a black spot on the presentation scheme. Gayatri, is the presentation having some black spot? Yes? Oh my God. Okay. Let me reshare. Now is it okay?
Still the same, sir.
Okay. Now is it okay?
No, still it remains same.
Some black bars are there, sir.
There is a marker. I don't see that. Okay, just give me 1 second. I will share this presentation with my colleague Vikas, and I will request him to share the presentation. Just hold on. Vikas, can you just check your email, please?
Your 100 graduates this Valentine's Day. कॉपियां नीली करने की उम्र में आपका बेटा हाथ पीले करवाना चाहता है क्या? किसके साथ?
Vikas, confirm whether you received the mail. Vikas, are you sharing the presentation? You need to unmute. Yeah. Because the third slide, please. Okay. Slideshow mode. Okay, so we'll continue, friends, our discussion. What happens when energy companies don't follow ESG? What do you think? What happens? Are you supposed to follow ESG? Is this mandated or is this voluntary? So can anyone tell me, following ESG is mandated under which law? Mandated for certain companies. Okay, CSR law. Okay, Monu Kumar, is ESG CSR? Sunil, BRSR. Okay, 1500. What is that? Okay. Top 500 companies. Okay, that's what Girish had to say. Okay, you're talking of BRSR guidelines, right? Okay, so BRSR is the only law on ESG in India. So I think from the chat, I come to know that you are mentioning two laws on ESG in India. One is the CSR law, Section 135 of the Companies Act. The other is the BRSR guidelines that is issued by SEBI. So you're saying there are two such legislations that talk about ESG, right? Okay. Is there any other regulation that speaks about ESG? So you're talking of domestic law, not international law. EPA, mono, right? Okay, okay. So, friends, let's understand what happens in case energy companies don't follow ESG. Please note this may be applicable to other kind of companies as well. The first challenge that happens is you may be in violation, right? There are jurisdictions across the world that have said that non-reporting of ESG is actually a crime. So, if you're dealing with markets beyond India, uh, uh, you may actually be dealing with markets beyond India in the supply chain context or in the final context of processing energy and actually sending it outside the country. It may be considered as a white collar crime. Now, interestingly, if you have seen, friends, the European Union has very strict reporting directives, and in India, when you are in violation of ESG, please note this kind of profits that you make from non-compliance of ESG may also be considered as proceeds of crime under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, PMLA law. So if you read the PMLA law, friends, which makes proceeds of a crime actionable, there are a lot of environmental violations that are also included in PMLA. So if you're in violation of any of the environmental norms, which are there in Water Act, Environmental Protection Act, Air Act also, then the profits that you make because of non-compliance will be considered as proceeds of crime, right? So do energy companies have a requirement to follow E and G? I think the answer is an absolute yes, right? So there are various legislations beyond just CSR and BRSR that actually apply to environment and social governance, including labor laws for that matter, right? Especially when you're talking from S perspective, because we'll go to the next point. Second, what happens if energy companies do not follow ESG? Friends, do you anticipate some kind of a litigation if a company does not comply with ESG? One of the most interesting cases, I'm sure some of you may have seen this case, this made news very recently, was a case of this company called Shell, which is a fossil fuel company. Friends, in a Dutch court, for many years right now, there was an appellate jurisdiction also in this case. Citizens did want Shell, a fossil fuel company primarily, to reduce its CO2 emissions by nearly 45% by 2030. Interestingly, this litigation was a tort case. It's a case of civil wrong, where this company historically has actually taken the planet for granted. It's extracted fossil fuel. It's only using fossil fuel, and hence citizens said that such kind of companies must take responsibility to reduce its carbon footprint, reduce its carbon emissions. And they said at least by 2030 it should be reduced by 45%. This is an international mandate, and it should be applicable to a company like Shell. So please note, in this litigation, the citizens in Netherlands said that every company has a standard of care to living beings on planet Earth. This is called the societal standard of care. It is your responsibility to use the resources in planet responsibility, right? And any kind of company that does not adhere to the same would be considered to be in breach of this. So, friends, Shell, though later on was able to prove that there is no measure to this standard of care, but I think litigation is one such mechanism that you may expose yourself if ESG is not complied with in these energy companies. So litigation is going to be probably a kind of risk that we come across. Because now, if some of you have read the Coca-Cola case, because Shell found this litigation on environment. There are a lot of companies that have faced litigation on governance. So today I will not deal with that, but let me take environment and social governance. So if people have read about Coca-Cola, unfortunately, Coca-Cola and companies like even Vedanta have not looked at ESG from a completely comprehensive perspective. And this is not from what I am saying. This is purely from case laws, judicial review that I am coming to this. So while Coca-Cola was extracting groundwater in Plachimada in Kerala, the Perumutti Panchayat case, they were not socially responsible. They were extracting groundwater. And please note, today, energy companies, if they're sinking borewells, they have to take an NOC from the Central Groundwater Authority. So the things have changed. But the point is, this company did not care for social governance. They extracted groundwater at the cost of the drinking water of the villages. They were not socially responsible, right? So this went on to become a major battle between local people and the company. It resulted in a lot of litigation, both at the Kerala High Court and the Supreme Court. So I think while we talk about social governance, it means social responsibility. It's not just corporate, but it's social responsibility, right? So I think litigation is one other mechanisms in which you may expose yourself in case ESG is not compliant with, because of course, unethical practices are something that are usually the case. A lot of regulators are imposing penalties for misleading statements on green assets. We have a special, session just on greenwashing, and I think greenwashing now is a huge challenge with ESG, because I believe, I hope some of you have heard about greenwashing, right? Is there a law on greenwashing in India? Okay. And does it apply to energy companies? Do we know what greenwashing means? So ESG is becoming so very popular. Yes, Kalpana. Please know, everywhere this is a talk. See, today investors will invest money only if the company has a great, robust ESG compliance. Banks will only lend you money only once they screen for ESG compliance. Right? Probably consumers are so very well aware that they will probably place orders with you only if you're in ESG compliance. So today, most companies want to flaunt their ESG achievements, which is okay. If you have achieved it, you can always flaunt it. But can companies mislead consumers, stakeholders, investors, and creditors by misleading on ESG? Right? Sometimes, please note, these may be categorized as what we call as greenwashing. Any misleading statement on your environmental achievements or social governance achievements is generally called as greenwashing. Now, EU has a very strict mandate on greenwashing. India has actually introduced a new guideline which Jay will definitely speak about, because I believe this is not only unethical right now, but it could be illegal. So, for example, when energy companies make very tall claims that this is what we have done from that time to this time, right? It could be misleading. We think it's unethical, but it could be very, very misleading and illegal as well. So, I think non-compliance of GST is not only in violation in litigation, but also resulting in unethical practices. Finally, friends, if you don't follow ESG, can any regulator take action against you? Can any regulator impose penalty upon you? Can the NGT, the National Green Tribunal in India, take some action against you? Can the National Green Tribunal take some action against you? Can it impose some penalties against you? Can the CERC, the Central Electricity Regulatory Commission, impose penalties upon you? Are you accountable to CERC, NGT, and such other agency that may want you to comply and monitor with ESG? Friends, the answer is an absolute yes, right? And more importantly, friends, don't forget, Some of the energy companies that Ragya is going to present upon may have such kind of impact that if there is an accident of the energy company, please note, because most of these energy companies who are dealing with fossil fuel are actually dealing with hazardous material. Now, this may, if it results in a disaster, then it may result in a lot of people actually losing their life. Belgium now has a law on what we call as ecocide. Belgium is probably the first country to actually define what ecocide means. Do you know what is ecocide? You know genocide, right? Have you heard about ecocide? Ecocide means, a massive impact on environment and lives from an activity that is inherently hazardous, right? So Belgium has come with this law, and energy companies could be at the risk, especially companies such as those dealing with nuclear energy or any other kind of, fossil fuel that may be of large investment as well. So I think with this slide, I should pause over here. I should stop and allow Vikas to come in. So till now, what we have looked at is why ESG, what is ESG, and what happens in case you do not comply with ESG, right? So that is the coverage that we have done so far. But very quickly, I would request Vikas to step in. Vikas is now going to speak about a very important area of what we call as the renewable purchase obligation. Paucity of time, I'll close my presentation and hand it over to my colleague, Vikas Kevut.
Thank you, sir. And hi, all. Friends, when we talk about ESG and an energy sector, and one of the drives that has been in the country has been to increase the energy production through the renewable sources that we have. Now, one of the mechanisms through which the promotion of renewable energy is done is through the renewable purchase of obligation, RPOs. Now, what is the RPO? Friends, RPO is the obligation imposed on the distribution companies, the discoms, to purchase a certain percentage of the energy through a renewable sources. Now, the sources can be different. They can be from solar energy. They can be from Indian energy, and so on and so forth. So the sources can be different, and a certain percentage of the total energy that they are consuming has to be purchased through the renewable sources. Now, friends, an interesting question comes whether hydro power is considered as a renewable purchase obligation. It's a very important question when we deal with the renewable purchase obligation. What do you think?
Interestingly, what Vikas is yes, Anmol, I'll tell you what renewable purchase obligation is. Renewable purchase obligations are a mandate. So it is to offset your non-renewables with renewables. So what happens is with the electricity sector right now, we want the dependency on non-renewables to be reduced. Right? So we want everyone to contribute to the ESG of energy. So in electricity, if suppose Karnataka is buying electricity from thermal power stations, and 100% of electricity of Karnataka is coming from thermal, do you think Karnataka is following ESG? No. Why? Why? So how much should be my energy mix or electricity mix? Let's come to electricity, because a renewable purchase obligation is for electricity. It can be extended also. Amjad, 30-70. Okay, so suppose you are energy intensive company like say steel production, cement production. Say SAIL, Steel Authority of India, or any other steel company. Can it buy electricity 100% from thermal today? Can it buy electricity 100% from nuclear?
Morning, sir.
Can it buy 100% from any of, say, fossil fuel, which are the traditional, conventional, non-renewable sector? Friends, please note the government of India is very, very conscious about its commitment under Paris Agreement. And I think the government of India has taken huge strides in fulfilling its mandate in the Paris Agreement. And by 2030, we want to change the narrative on the non-renewable sector. We want to invest heavily in the renewable sector. To be honest, friends, the target is nearly 500 gigawatts to be generated just by the renewable sector. 300 gigawatts will come from solar, 100 will come from wind, and 100 will come from the other sectors. This is a mandate of the government. So we are, for example, should we take a pledge that we will not have any new thermal power project? Because the renewable sector is the process of where ESG can be complied with. So please note, power companies have been asked to buy power from renewable sector. How to encourage the renewable industry, how to encourage or how to balance or how to offset the renewable sector. So the renewable purchase obligation was one such scheme that was introduced by the government, where electricity should be bought from the renewable companies as well, from renewable energy as well, right? So I think this is what renew purchase obligation at that point was. Okay, so because if you can go to the previous slide, I'll just close over here. You will notice, friends, that hydropower in India was supposed to be the traditional source of power. For example, Karnataka, there are a lot of dams that are built, and hydroelectricity is generated from these dams. Initially, we thought hydropower should not be bought under the RPO obligation, right? Because these were all existing power projects. And do you think hydropower is green power?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, green compared to fossil fuel. But is it green in the actual sense of the green? Okay, so
It's
yes,
renewable,
yes.
so it's green.
It is renewable and hence it is green. I agree, it is renewable, but we are not very sure it's absolutely green because there is no real power that can be considered as green unless you actually reduce environmental impact of each of these sectors, right? So every renewable power need not be green power. Please note it down. Yeah, that's also a clear, interesting distinction that we make. But the government of India has changed its mandate, and now it has said that all hydropower will be considered under RPOs. Initially, they had said only new projects will be considered RPOs, but right now they have extended this to all hydropowers, and hence you will notice that by 2030 we expect most states to buy at least 38 to 40% of their power from the renewable sector, right? So it is 60-40 is the mix that is targeted by 2030. This is the balance that we are expecting to do in the electricity sector. So that is where renewable has a lot of space. There is a lot of traction in the economy, and this is something that is going to grow over a period of time.
Thank you, sir. So, friends, just to conclude this discussion, I will just briefly discuss who are subject to this renewable purchase of obligations. Friends, three entities are subjects. So first are your distribution companies, so your ISCOMs. They have to purchase a certain percentage of the power consumption by them through the renewable sector. Second, friends, we have the open access consumers. Now, who are these open access consumers? Friends, open access consumers are those companies or entities who consume the energy in large quantity. And as per the contemporary trends, if your energy consumption is more than 5 megawatts, you will be considered as an open access consumers, and you can purchase the electricity directly from the energy providers and not through your local distribution companies. And these companies are also subject to the renewable purchase obligation, meaning they also have to buy certain portion of their energy from the renewable sources. Thirdly, friends, who are subject what we call as captive consumers. Now, who are captive consumers? Friends, as sir was mentioning before, if you are a steel uh, company, right? You are a steel manufacturer, means you are consuming energy in a large scale quantity. So sometimes what happens is when you are consuming large scale, you think, I should have my own power generation, right? Instead of purchasing from sources, I can generate my own source, right? So for those consumers also are also considered as part of the RPO. Now, friends, a very important question comes. Though the RPO obligation is mandatory, but sometimes it can happen, and in many cases it happens is the supply is not as much as the demand that is required, right? So RPO has to be met by all these categories of companies, but the supply is not there. The production through the energy sources is not there. So how do we comply with that? One of the mechanisms through which this RPO obligation is met is through REC, what we call as the Renewable Energy Certificate. Now, friends, how this works, just to very briefly look at that. Friends, when a renewable energy source gives energy to, per se, distribution companies, right? And the distribution companies or the consumer to whom the energy is supplied is not consuming the entire energy, means some portion of the energy is still left with the energy sources, with the renewable energy producer. They sell this energy to the energy exchange market in the form of REC, that is the energy certificates. The companies then can get these certificates from the energy exchange markets and then fulfill their RPO obligations. For example, friends, if say the energy production in Karnataka is much more than what is being consumed in Karnataka through the renewable energy sources, then, and suppose in a different state, the production through the renewable energy is very less than the what is required to meet their RPO obligation. Then that state can purchase a renewable energy certificate. The companies from that state can purchase the renewable energy certificate and meet their RPO obligation. Now, friends, what happens? Just a last point that I will conclude with. What happens if you fail to meet your RPO obligations? Very, very important question, friends. There are mechanisms through which you can meet, but what will happen if you fail to meet your RPO obligation? Friends, please note, a penalty can be imposed on you. You've been asked to deposit some funds to the fund that has been established for meeting this RPO obligations. Sir, with that, I will conclude this short presentation on the RPOs.
Unfortunately, we are constrained with time, so we are just on the surface. We apologize for that. But I think without further ado, we'll go to the next session. The next session is going to be taken by Gayatri Girish. She's an advocate and a practitioner and also a consultant with the Center for Environmental Law. And we have our very good friend, and an amazing person, Raghav Parsarthi. He is also an advocate who is specializing in renewable fossil fuel, energy sector. He has written extensively on this, and he's also pursuing his PhD. So both are here, and I would welcome both of them. It's like I'm welcoming to both these two people. Gayatri is already in CEERA, so I welcome him. So it's only for Raghav. Yeah, Gayatri and Raghav, it's over to you. Thank you so much. And yes, please.
Thank you, sir. So I would share the screen. It's visible, right? Okay. So with that introduction and a very enlightening session, I would like to take a few minutes of around 20 minutes on talking about the international framework for ESG in energy sector. Why international framework is important? Because it's all about energy is all about global. There is actually no borders for energy sector. It's been right from the beginning. If we consider era of energy as two phases, one is previously to ESG and the present ESG considerations. So energy is something which has no borders, which is actually extraterritorial, and it is all pervading. So it's important that we understand in this globalized world, we understand why international framework stands so important in energy sector and ESG in energy sector, because all the countries are striving towards making a standardized or a uniform ESG reporting conditions, because every country is now transitioning into renewable resources. So I would like to start with saying that ESG is all about sustainable investing. So it's all about business. It's not actually about charity. When we say environment, social governance, it's all about where your money, the corporates are investing in what sector and what kind of ethical practices and business practices, environmental practices are being followed. There are two important things. Mainly, we all discussed about decarbonization, so carbon emissions, and how do we deal with carbon emissions in other forms of energy, or like energy, electricity, and all such pervading aspects. Now, when we start about energy, there is, again, I mean, I told you it is a pre-ESG era. The major factor in international sector was International Energy Charter. This formed the basic condition, or it is actually one of those very few treaties which had a legal binding and also had a sovereignty. It recognized the sovereignty of each state in its energy resources. So this had been one of the major treaty in the international sector. So gradually, this was a pre-Paris Agreement era. So once when the Paris Agreement took over, the Energy Charter kind of was sidelined because of its conditions, like it had more prominence to fossil fuel and more prominence to trade in fossil fuels. But considering before the Paris Agreement, the conditions were the Energy Charter had its own benefits, like it was all about investment protection by different countries and the corporations. There was a free trade and liberalization of trade in energy sector. There was freedom of transition, or the energy movement from one nations to another, or probably from one continent to another continent. There was a proper structured mechanism for dispute settlement, And there were also environmental aspects, but I think the Paris Agreement starts as a milestone where environment and social governance started taking a predominance in energy sector. So energy charter had its own benefits and its own challenges. And now the energy charter, to keep itself relevant, is been talking about transitions to clean energy from different countries. Few of the countries who were parties to the treaties have withdrawn, like European Union, other and such countries. But I think gradually Paris Agreement has taken over the energy charter. Nonetheless, energy charter in the pre-Paris Agreement era had its own benefits, because as I already said, energy is all about trade. Energy is all about intercontinental trade and business mechanism. So we from energy charter moved on to the renewable sectors. So in the Paris Agreement scenario, now what happens is there are three important conditions. One is that, as we already know, energy sector forms predominance in greenhouse gas emissions. But to make it energy, to extract energy, there are few important sectors which are predominant. That is mining and minerals extraction. Until you have a proper mining and mineral extraction policy, the ESGs in energy sector will not have its a proper meaning. So if we start looking into mining and mineral sectors, so it has its sectors like, in the renewable, non-renewable sector, it is about coal mining, and the renewable sectors, it is all about few minerals extraction. So ESG and mining extraction forms a major contribution. So even the renewable, see, the transitions from non-renewable to renewable is actually a double whammy. It means that you're try to find a solution to one problem, but you're actually ending up with another kind of challenge. So if you want to move away from coal section, coal mining and other minerals extraction, you are moving into another kind of renewable energy sector, which also requires mining. So that is where the question of, if I go, I will just be sliding into back and forth with the slides. If I talk about few important sectors, like, of course, we know that this has around 4 to 7% of greenhouse gas emissions is caused by mining sector. But that is a direct result. But indirect result is that around mining related deforestation has happened from 2001 to 2019. So the mining related activity has caused deforestation. So imagine one side you are having carbon emissions through mining sector, and another side you are having a deforestation, and you're removing the natural carbon sinks. So in the two ways, that is called a double whammy. In two ways, the mining sector has caused more of carbon emissions than any other sector. For example, even today, agriculture is the largest greenhouse gas emitters. Then you have urbanization, and then is the mineral sector. But still, considering the from 2001 to 2019, it had been the greatest contributor of deforestation and carbon emissions in two ways. So before we go into ESG factors in renewable sectors, and there is that gold and coal mining were biggest drivers of deforestation. Now, if we want to have renewable sector, now critical minerals mining is more important. Again, by 2050, if we have to take over the dirty coal, what it is called, the dirty coal mining extraction, critical minerals mining becomes more dominant, but still the mining activities will be continued. Still the mining activities will cause for deforestation. Now, what are the critical minerals? Copper. Now we are into the era of electric vehicles. We need copper, we need lithium. All these electric vehicles are lithium ion batteries. We need them. Nickel, cobalt, rare earth elements are required in wind turbines. Wind energy is taking a dominant stage now. And aluminium, or these are different critical minerals. They do still cause deforestation in one or the other way. So it is not that we are moving from of course, these are all required for clean energy, but still the considerable factor is that they still cause deforestation. Now, clean energy transition require mining activities 6 times more. By the time, if we want to have a clean energy by 2040, the critical minerals extraction will be 6 times more than what it is now. So it will take over coal consumption by 2040. The only solution to this is energy mix with renewables and non-renewables. The coal will not completely be phased out until 2040 to 2050, and grid integration technologies will have a predominant role in making the energy sector more compliant to ESGs. Okay, so these are all the guidelines which in India, which probably the other speakers will be talking about. Now, if I have to consider what is the international framework of ESG, there are 4 or 5 important things. The sustainability performance. What is a sustainability performance? In environment factor, the sustainability performance is that, for example, if you take mining activities, what would have happened in your unregulated mining to 40 or 50 years, a rationalization through ESG can make this mining activity up to 80 to 100 years. So when there is a longevity, you have a regulated mining activity, there is a longevity, and this happens when there is energy mix. Now, there is 82 in the energy mix, 82% of the energy is by coal. So you cannot phase out the coal till 2040 because most of the sectors are dependent on fossil fuel. So 82% is the energy mix of in the energy mix. By 2040, if it goes up to 30%, if it reduces to 30%, or 70% can be up to for renewable purposes, then there is a sustainability performance. So ESG has a lot of factors in making this energy mix more sustainable. And what is potential for impact? Potential for impact is there will be a longevity in making mining sector more and more a rationalized way of mining. Now, materiality in the context of ESG is again a technical term. So it talks about identifying financial and non-financial impact. So what is non-financial impact? It's maybe your considerations on social governance, financial impact, considerations on your business attributes, and mostly the considerations for ESG in environmental would be waste management, resource usages, then these are all environmental conditions, and the supply chain and labor standards is a social condition where these things, the disclosures on these things will be very important for sustainable investing. Again, business ethics has different formula and formulations, but ESG is mainly about data disclosures on what are the opportunities that your business is dealing with, what are the risks that you're taking to make this more sustainable, and how are these business operations. Now, if you read into the sustainability report of many corporates or the top 100 to 500 corporates, they always talk about ESG management and ESG reporting. ESG reporting, what was actually priorly was only a kind of voluntary. Now it's, again, it is not legally enforceable, but I think the national law will actually be in considering the sustainability report aspects of the large companies, which have taken the sustainability report more responsibly in disclosing their important aspects on ESGs. Now, who are the stakeholders in ESGs? So there are investors in the who all invests in the corporates. There are boards, committees, insurers, mainly insurers and reinsurers. You have a lot of companies on insurers and reinsurers who actually take up this matter if your ESG is very strong. So the international framework talks about a strong ESG reporting so that the investors, boards, and insurers, creditors have a lot of say in having these kind of mandatory reporting. Now, one such example is the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. So these, if you are compliant to these financial disclosures, the stakeholders like investors, boards, insurers, creditors will have more investment, or what is called as a sustainable investment into these companies. So sustainability accounting standards is one such task where these investors will look into before investing into any of these companies, because energy transition requires huge amount of money. It's not just transition. I mean, it's not just yesterday you were using coal and today you'll be using wind energy or solar energy. It's not as simple as saying that. So energy transition requires a huge amount. It's billions of dollars of amount. So these kind of technical reporting by the companies helps the investors and the creditors to have a huge amount in the energy transition. Now, who are all beneficiaries? How are the employees and consumers beneficial? So we all know about sustainable development goals, which has been, again, this SDGs have been formulated and reformulated, refined over the years, and they have a very proper structure now. So under these circumstances, the SDG disclosures by the companies makes the employers and consumers more beneficial than the investors. Though SDGs is beneficial to many of the stakeholders, but employers and consumers stands more benefited than in the disclosures based on the United Nations Sustainable Developmental Goals. So these are the stakeholders in the international framework, and considering these stakeholders, the different companies have come up with different ESG reporting, but all having a uniform standardized disclosures, because at the end of the day, the average you have to reduce is 1.5% pre-industrial era. This is again the target is to be reached is that, so from 2050 to 2070, when we peak the energy consumption in 2050, and then we go sustainable from till 2070, every country's target is on an average 1.5 degrees has to be reduced. So the uniform and the standardized reporting has been developed by different countries, which helps the business atmosphere. Now, in the international sector, I would like to take few examples of those countries which have actually a very technical and scientific reporting structure. One is that Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, CSRD, by the European Union. And this is one of the very structurized formula for the ESG reporting. We all know EU is the largest consumption of energy sector, because most of the industrialized countries, their energy consumption on an average and per capita energy consumption is more than the countries like India, which did not have a manufacturing unit or were not part of the industrialization. So they have a very less per capita energy consumption. But the countries of European Union and USA have the larger energy consumption. So they have formulated a very globalized structure, which is a very important thing in that is that whichever companies are localized in EU, but also those countries which have their subsidiaries in other countries should also follow this. For example, an European Union company is based in UK, but has its subsidiary in India. So Indian company and the European company must follow this CSRD reporting structure. Now, another example is from National Greenhouse and Energy Reporting from Australia. Australia is actually a kind of similar to the European Union or United Kingdom. So they also have formulated this structure depending upon the different sectoral consumption of energy. For example, manufacturing industries have a different set of reporting system, and energy consumptions like transport systems have a different energy consumption systems reporting. So another very good example of energy reporting is in the Australian model. Another one is the streamlined energy and carbon reporting. So now this is exclusively carbon reporting legislation. So no other country has a carbon reporting legislation exclusively for carbon. So we have, in India, we have Air Pollution Act, but it's not a carbon reporting legislation. It has every other sector. But this is carbon reporting legislation, very micro managed to each industries, This includes small and medium scale industries also in the UK sector. So UK has this legislation sectors includes small and medium industries, large manufacturers or manufacturing industries, and the huge investment industries, which are multinationals. So they have a very specific, apart from CSRD reporting, this also should follow the carbon reporting legislation. So particularly it's almost like a real-time management of carbon reporting. Another example is the sustainable finance disclosure in the European Union. Again, this is so the difference between corporate sustainability reporting directive and the sustainable finance disclosure is this is especially only on the finance disclosure where the companies take the investment and how it is spent. But in the sustainability reporting, your sustainability aspects or like how long term you have you make a disclosure based on the environment, social and other conditions. But this is mostly on the finance disclosure regulation. Where is your income and where is you're generating the income and where you are making it flow in your companies. So these four major directives are very important in ESG reporting. So this, when you read these things, you will get to know this. These are very scientifically and very meticulously planned ESG reporting techniques. Otherwise, you would really not calculate how you reduce 1.5%, 1.5 carbon emissions by the to combat the global warming. Unless you have a very technical ESG reporting, you cannot calculate such things at by 2050 and how would you make it more sustainable after 2050. So there are other private initiatives like global real estate sustainability. This is not a law or a directive, but there are certain international companies which helps their companies to get into these kind of reporting. We all know urbanization and construction causes a larger emissions next to agriculture and mining. So these sectors also must kind of follow the reporting structure with the real estate, land management, and other sectors related to real estate management. So these are the very important structurized ESG reporting, which helps in managing the company's ESG factors. So the greatest benefit of having this ESG reporting is that there is a lot of transparency, which was not there prior to the Paris Agreement. So every corporate management would have been kind of elitist. But today, even a common man can understand reading the sustainability report and however their money is being spent. The ESG is spent by the corporates. Even a common man can understand that, okay, these are the things that are being beneficial to the environment. These are the things that are beneficial to the labor standards. These are the ethics that has been followed by the government. Not just common man who also wants to invest as an institutional investor or as an individual investor. ESG reporting helps a lot in making such decisions. So moving on, I would just like to take one case study on Amazon. So I'm not here to kind of propagate anything for Amazon, but reading this Amazon sustainability report. Now it has all the aspects of ESG. Then it has pledged itself to have a net zero carbon emission by 2040. And it says it has deployed around 10,000 electric vehicles, carbon-free energy. They are transitioning into renewable energy, 100% capacity. For example, all automobiles and the transport sectors will have 100% renewable energy and the carbon-free. Now it deals with waste and circularity and water positive by 2030. So water positivity is about how much water you're using and how much you're recharging. If your recharge is more than your usage, that means you're a water positive and more responsibly using water industry. Now 100% of packaging material in Europe and India is household recycling. Now in all these things, I mean, it looks very nice that, okay, these things are being followed, but how much on the ground we would know. So one important, as I already said, the consumer awareness by reading this sustainability report becomes very high. Now, for example, if you say 100% of packaging material in Europe and India is household recyclable, there is a very important catch in the statements. It does not say you have phased out plastics. It says household recyclable. Even if it is plastic, it says you can reuse it in the house. So recyclable is a very different technical word than reusable. So recyclable is you are getting into a different format. You are not reusing it, you are putting into a different format is recyclable. Reusing it, in the same format you are using it. So it's not as rosy as it looks and not as clean as it looks. But by reading the sustainability report, see, why did I choose Amazon? Because most of us would have bought many things from Amazon. So the consumer awareness while reading this. So when you next time order it and you see the packaging material is of plastics, for example, in India, multi-layered plastics is banned, but still if you see Amazon using a multi-layered plastics, you can question them. So that is how the S factor, social governance factors of the ESG comes into picture. So waste and circularity, yes, of course, if you have bought something from the Amazon and you're not able to dispose it in a biodegradable way, you can question them. So this is actually the beauty of ESG reporting, how these environment and social factors take a very front stage in making consumer aware and the employees in a way aware of their labor standards. So, I mean, what are the challenges to the ESG? How would you report a fossil fuel dominant corporation? What shall be the corporate environmental factors in the fossil fuel dominant corporate? So, but there are still, when there is a fossil fuel dominance, the amount you spent on transition forms a part of ESG reporting. Then amount you spend on land reclamation. For example, Coal India has recovered around 50 to 60% of the land that has been used for coal mining. So that land has been reclaimed. So it can be used for social governance. It can be used for urban forestry. It can be used for social forestry. So all those things can be possible in land reclamation through ESG. And what kind of, and there are investors who would invest in the ESG having a land reclamation policy of a company or of the government. Now that is one of the major challenge when you're transitioning from coal sector to the renewable energy sector. And again, so we all know the kind of impact the COP has been having for the past few years, or the climate fund amount pledged by the industrialized countries. It all looks very investor friendly. On paper, it is environment friendly. In practice, it is investor friendly. But we really need to understand how far this sustainable investing can really lead to 2050 to 2070. So 2050 to 2070 is the key factor where you can analyze your consumption to a sustainable rate. So this is how international framework works for the industrialized corporations and the industrialized countries having greater amounts to be pumped into energy transitions from non-renewable to renewable. So that's it from my side.
Actually, that was a great presentation. Before Raghav comes in, from Gayatri's presentation and what is being discussed in the chat area, a couple of things that I would like to ask all of you. First of all, do companies think implementing ESG comes at a higher cost?
Sir, even if ESG is implemented, it is somewhere saving the cost of the production by looking at better sources of energy and water utilization. Yes, it's an investment heavy as well, but in overall, it also reduces. When I visit in my project various factories, people come up with so many ideas in terms of like investing taking at other sources of energy, which has drastically brought down the production cost. It has saved the cost on the energy.
Yeah, so a lot of us in the global south, see the entire climate debate and diplomacy is between global north and global south. I saw Amjad saying these people got developed, they're industrialized, now they want us to do ESG. But Amjad, I say that this kind of a proposition looked good in the 1990s, but as we are becoming one of the top 5 larger economies of the world, we owe a larger responsibility to the planet. It's not just to the global north. You have to introspect and ask and answer to yourself that whether ESG, not only from a political, social, and economic perspective, but even economically cost perspective, is it better for you? I think in the longer run, Amjad, I think it would be great for everyone and every industry, whether it is for profit or not profit, to implement ESG, right? So this is a positive narrative that we must build. Of course, there will be a short-term cost, but the long-term saving that you can do from a great implementation of ESG is something that I'm sure everyone can start. For example, just water consumption. See, you think water consumption you can do it at a rampant phase. It is groundwater. It is something that you can extract and exploit. But what happens after 10 years? The groundwater will get depleted if you don't do rainwater harvesting. So look at the implications both between short-term and long-term goals, but look at that from a responsibility of the current generation that owes to the future generation. Right? So it's not the current board of directors that have to account for profits. I think it's the current board of directors that has to account for the future board of directors. That responsibility is something that has to be taken, and that's why ESG is something that you invest today and reap benefits tomorrow. Right? That's where ESG becomes critical and important. Secondly, in Gayatri's presentation, most of you were looking at the concerns of international directives and reporting standards that she was saying. But don't forget, Indian companies are abroad right now. The Adanis are mining coal in Australia. We are going to Argentina and trying to get lithium. So the Indian companies are multinational companies. So we have international obligations. And these are obligations that come from a comparative jurisdiction. And finally, don't forget why these international ESG norms are relevant and important is because Europe has a very interesting carbon tax. So energy intensive companies anywhere in the world, if they are not energy efficient, they may undergo a tax when the goods are getting into the European Union. So, so energy efficiency is good even for your export market. Don't forget that. So Europe has this carbon tax that may be imposed on heavy industries that are not energy efficient or that are not using energy from renewable sources. So this is where responsibility of multinational companies also does come in. So I think from overall that perspective, yes, that's right, Mayank and Raji, you are right. That is called CB, that is Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. It is called Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. So two of our participants do know about that. So I'm very happy that you know about it. So this is where Indian companies ought to have that kind of responsibility, both nationally, complying with ESG as domestic requirement, but internationally, if you're looking to grow business and comply with norms in other jurisdictions as well. Okay, so thank you, Gayatri, for that presentation. Now let me invite Raghav. Sorry, we are now in a fast-paced mode, so quickly catching up with the speakers that we have. Raghav, it's over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, CEERA and the NPTEL for this opportunity to interact with the participants. Today's topic that I would wish to discuss is on the green energy infrastructure and the ESG principles. Am I clear? Sir, am I audible?
Yes, yes. Akshay, can you give host rights to Raghav, Ragya, and YG Murtindra? Yes, Raghav, it's over to you, please.
Yes, sir. So the topic that has been that I would be discussing today is on the green energy infrastructure and the ESG principles. Now we have looked at some of the fundamental aspects of what constitutes the green energy, why ESG is important, especially from the perspective of reducing carbon emissions and reducing the carbon footprint. Now, you all know that India, being a signatory to the Paris Agreement, has to positively contribute towards the reduction of the carbon. And as Sir rightly mentioned in the initial part of our discussion, that the net zero emission that has been determined for India is somewhere in the year 2070, right? Another probably 45 more years to go. But however, it is not just that we do it at once, we achieve the net zero target at once. It doesn't happen that way, right? It's a gradual process that we undergo on a yearly basis, on a daily basis, right? Now, when we are talking about the aspect of the necessary infrastructure that we need to build for the purpose of achieving this net zero target. Yeah. In order to achieve the net zero target, the annual the kind of infrastructure that we need to develop has to be following the principles of the ESG that is already signed, that is already determined under the Paris Agreement and even under the domestic legislations. Now, in terms of the net zero contribution that I mentioned, we all know that under the Paris Agreement, we have all the countries who are signatory basically follow this particular principle of intergenerational equity, common but differentiated responsibility, and also the perspective of there being the nationally determined contribution. Now, each country has a certain set of standards which they have to follow, which they have to implement at every sector, right? Now, when we are talking about the aspect of common but differentiated responsibility, please also understand that this particular responsibility is not the same for a developed country and for a developing country. Now, this has been attached with another aspect called the respective capabilities. Now, what do we mean by the term respective capabilities? Basically, it means that when we are talking about the respective capabilities, in the sense, the technology that we have, that we possess as on today, right? We may not be able to achieve the desired goal, probably the annual number that we have set for ourselves. We may not be able to achieve it immediately, right? As I told you, it's a gradual process and we need to keep working towards it. Therefore, the term CBDR, that is common but differentiated responsibility, also goes along with the respective capabilities, right? Now, in addition to that, there are multiple other efforts that are being undertaken. As I told you, the net zero target is not a one-day target that we do it right on the first day of the 2017, right? Now, because of this particular target, there are works that are undergoing in the background. In the sense, one of the example is the Solar Alliance, which we have initiated way back in the year 2018 itself, wherein we try to harness the energy that is already available in the nature, which is inexhaustible, right? Now, because of this, because of this particular alliance, multiple countries have now joined together and have come about to ensure that they achieve the net zero target at the earliest possible timeline, right? Coming to the aspect of the infrastructure that is required. Now, when we are talking about the infrastructure, please understand it requires huge amount of money. As Gayatri ma'am mentioned, for the purpose of the developing a net zero emission kind of project, we need to invest huge sums of money, right? It can be in the sense that it can be in the renewable sector, it can be in the non-renewable sector as well. Now, when we are talking about the renewable sector itself, there are multiple aspects which has to be looked at. We cannot, at the cost of environment, reduce the business or reduce the or deteriorate the environment at the cost of the livelihood, health, and other aspects. Because of this, way back in the year 2005-2006, the United Nations came up with what is called as principles of responsible investing. That is the UNPRI. The UNPRI basically talks about 6 fundamental principles. This particular UNPRI is specifically addressing the responsible investing concepts. It promotes the responsible investing concepts. Now, this particular principles is not applicable for everyone, but this is mostly applicable for the financial institutions who are into the business of funding, who are into the business of investments, right? Now, what are these 6 principles that we are talking about? As you can see on the screen, the first and the foremost principle is with regard to the ESG issues in the investment and the ownership investment policies itself. Now, please understand, any business cannot have a negative approach towards the environment and sustainability. Earlier, it used to so happen prior to the global warming, prior to the ice cap melting. It used to so happen that the businesses used to consider the aspect of environment and sustainability from a negative perspective, right? It used to be seen as a cost. It used to be seen as a burden, additional burden. However, because of the UNPRI, we have assumed, or we have come to a position which basically puts us in the pedestal of making specific investments towards sustainability, towards ensuring that the environment is protected, right? So at the time of making the decision itself, it is very important that we look at the ESG issues and then put the money where the business can succeed. The second important principle is with regard to the ownership policies and the implementation. Now, I'll just take it, club different principles together for easier understanding and also to reduce the time consumption. The ownership issues that requires to be looked at. Now, say for example, the investor who is putting in huge amounts of money, if he is not considering the prevailing regulations towards environment consumption and towards environment conservation and the basic ESG principles, right? He will be losing a lot of money because of the losses that he may incur, or because of the penalties that the government itself may impose on them, right? Now, in order to address all this, the implementation, it's not just the ownership aspect, but also the implementation that has to be critically looked at. The third and the fourth important aspect is with regard to the reporting and the disclosure part of it. Now, even though there are multiple regulations, multiple rules that have come around under the Environment Protection Act, under the Air and Water Act, the aspect of disclosure and reporting still remains not very much enforced, right? We don't see much of disclosures happening, even though there are BRSR rules, there are SEBI guidelines on this particular aspect. The reporting and disclosure is an important aspect when we are talking about the ESG perspective. The last one is with regard to making these aspects, making these investments efficient. In the sense, I just saw one of the comments that we are still running with a 20-year-old coal industry sector, which is basically powering, which is generating the power, right? Yes, it is very much relevant from the perspective that 20 years back, somebody would have invested a huge amount of money, and the gestation to get back that amount itself takes a long time. Now, say for example, if somebody has invested 20 crores as on today, he may not get back the 20 crores right today itself, right? He may need at least 5 to 7 years to get that amount invested to him back, right? So keeping these particular points in mind, the change cannot be immediate, but it's a slow and gradual process, but it is mandatory and it has to be done over a period of time. Now, we have been discussing so much about the aspect of green energy from the aspect of sustainability. Now, what do we mean by the term sustainable infrastructure? As per the McKinsey Center for Business and Environment a report that was issued in the year 2016, the sustainable infrastructure basically means that it is a system that is very well planned, designed, constructed, operated, and decommissioned, which basically means it's an end-to-end process which takes care from the part of initial installation till the part of decommission, where there is economic and financial, social, environment, which basically from the perspective of climate, climate resilience, and there are some institutional sustainability which focuses on the entire infrastructure itself, right? Now, because of this sustainable infrastructure, there are numerous issues which can be cut down, in the sense the carbon emissions can be cut down, the pollutants can be cut down, right? So therefore, the sustainable infrastructure critically assumes an important part for the investment perspective. Now, why is the sustainable or the ESG part of it relevant from the infrastructure perspective? Now, please understand that when we are talking about the sustainability component, we need to have, due to the changes in the recent environment, now because of the climate change, because of the changes in the environment, there are a lot of floods, there are a lot of wildfires that are taking place. It becomes critical, it becomes very important for us to build such an infrastructure that is disaster and climate resilient, right? Now, any changes in the climate can have an adverse impact over huge amounts of investments that the businesses have put their money in, right? Therefore, the sustainable infrastructure plays a crucial role when the investor is putting their money in any forms of business. The next part, the next important concept is with regard to the involvement of the private parties. Now, as I told you, big money, probably some of the big governments, say for example, US or European countries, may be having big money, right? The situation is not the same in India or other developing countries. When we are talking about the development of a climate resilient infrastructure, please understand that we need to involve the private parties. We need to involve the big businesses who are able to put in sufficient amount of money to ensure that we build such an infrastructure which is climate resilient, and also it can go for a very long period of time. Now, the next part is with regard to the location, the type of project, and the infrastructure that is necessary for the purpose based on the location. Now, say for example, in the Himalayan mountain ranges, if we probably try and build a solid waste management plant. Now, because of the present scenario, because of the lot of trekkers going there, polluting the area, right? Now, it seems like an important development there, which is much required for them, right? Whereas the same may not be required elsewhere, which is already managing its garbage, its pollutants really well, right? Now, considering these factors becomes a very important part of the investment plan and the analysis. Now, in addition to this, what are the government initiatives? What do the government do when we are talking about the regulatory compliances, or when we are also talking about the different schemes that can be introduced to assist the public participation in terms of these projects? Government basically has come up with multiple such regulations. As I told you, under the Companies Act, many of you are aware of it. Under the Companies Act, we have the corporate social responsibility, which has been introduced under the new Companies Act of 2013. In addition to that, the SEBI, that is the Stock Exchange, the Securities and Exchange Board of India, has also mandated some of the businesses which are basically the top listed companies also to follow the BRSR regulations, BRSR guidelines, right? Which basically means that they have to comply with these regulations from the perspective of social and environmental compliances. Additionally, in the recent times, what has happened was, we all know that there is a legislation called the Electricity Act of 2003. This particular legislation of 2003 provides for different powers, both to the state government and to the central government, to come up with different regulations, different rules at different point in time. Now, what happened was, in terms of development of infrastructure, most of the state governments, through their electricity regulatory commissions, basically get into a contractual arrangement for the purpose of generating power. Now, one such regulation was enacted by the central government that is called the Electricity Promoting Renewable Energy through Green Energy Open Access Rules of the year 2002. Now, this is one such legislation which specifically talked about the open access being provided to which can be sold, the power which can be sold to the companies, by the companies who are into the generation through the renewable energy sector. Now, because of this, what happened was, since the regulation was basically developed by the central government, recently on sometime in the month of December, the Karnataka High Court struck down these rules on the ground that the center was basically encroaching upon the powers and the functions that has been vested with the state government. Now, ideally, this particular rule of 2022 was supposed to have been issued by the state government in consultation with the concerned state regulatory authority. But what happened was the center has assumed power, center has taken up this power, and because of that, they enacted this particular rules, and which ultimately got struck down by the Karnataka High Court. And as you can see on the screen, this is the case laws, that is Brindavan Hydropower versus Union of India. Moving forward, the other important aspect which we need to understand is with regard to the green energy. Now, we have been talking about the aspect of green energy, sustainable infrastructure, all that. What do we basically mean by the term green energy? The term green energy has been defined in the rules that you can see on the screen, that is the Promoting Renewable Energy rules. In that particular rules itself, they have defined what do we mean by the term green energy. The term green energy basically means that it is an electrical energy produced from the renewable sources, more specifically the hydro and even the solar, wherein even the component of storing the power is on a renewable basis, right? Or any other technology that can be adopted at the relevant point in time. This particular mechanism, as has been conceived under this particular rules, basically talks about the definition of the green energy and also includes multiple other aspects which replaces the old fossil fuels or the conventional fossils, right? Keeping all these pointers in view, what are the advantages that the companies have if in case they are supposed to basically look at the, or if they start following the compliances as under the ESG principles? Please understand, there are multiple benefits for the companies if they have an ESG integration into their business. The first and the foremost thing is there is a long-term financial return that they can expect. Now, as I mentioned in the initial part of my discussion, non-compliance can sometimes lead to a penalty being imposed by the government, or even the courts these days are actively, proactively engaged in imposing the penalties to a very great extent. Now, because of this, the losses can be basically mitigated, the losses can be reduced. In addition to that, not just from the financial part of view, there is also the risk management and the mitigation of any potential risks that may arise because of uncertain scenario that may arise because of this particular business development. The last and the important part is any business which has to survive has to maintain a good in the sense that they have to maintain a good reputation, right? They have to maintain a good image in the market. Now, because of the ESG integration, it provides all these benefits, which basically not just promotes the business, it also helps them thrive in proceeding with their profit motive objective that they basically are established with, right? Now, since I come from the background of oil and gas sector, I would like to mention that even in the oil and gas sector, we have certain aspects which we focus from the perspective of having a potential impact on the environment. Even as I told you, oil and gas extraction consumes a lot of energy. It requires a lot of energy, it requires a lot of resources, and as a collateral, there is a lot of damage also which is caused to the environment. Now, say for example, in the offshore extraction of oil process, because of the deep drilling activities, because of the deep drilling activity, a lot of marine environment gets affected, and the severe critical ecosystem also have been damaged. Now, there are certain policies which have been incorporated over a period of time, wherein the government, through the Directorate General of Hydrocarbons, has come up with specific policies, which is called the Good International Petroleum Industry Practices. Basically, it's a policy that has been initiated in the year 2016, which talks about adapting better engineering practices for the purpose of exploration and extraction of oil and gas resources. Now, in addition to this, the GIPIP also talks about having an effective safety and health considerations, which gets implemented not just for the perspective of the environment, but also the also the persons who are involved in the business of the oil and gas extraction. The second important rules that is relevant for consideration is with regard to the guidelines for management of oil and gas resource. That is again one of the important rules that has been followed, and this is in order to ensure that there is even development, there is orderly development, there is proper monitoring of the extraction and exploration process, and there is also effective utilization and sharing of infrastructure mechanism that is already provided under it. Now, before I conclude, I would just like to discuss two important case studies as to why the sustainable infrastructure or sustainable considerations are very important when we are talking about development of infrastructure. One of the case is the Pench Kanha Tiger Reserve case. Now, this is a case that started way back in the year 2009, which pertains to a land acquisition project for the road construction between a place called Sioni and Nagpur. It's a 125-kilometer stretch, wherein out of the 125 kilometers, almost 50% of it was falling within the Tiger Reserve area, which basically means it was a tiger hotspot. And within the premises of these two forests, that is the Kanha and Pench Tiger Reserves, this particular area fell. Now, I don't know if it was by oversight or if it was deliberate. The government continued with the project. The government started all the works that was required to be undertaken for the project, which basically led to a lot of protests. Ultimately, the Supreme Court had to intervene in this matter, and they had to stay the entire project because it was affecting the tiger reserves and also the local people who were involved there. Now, what happened was, in order to address this particular scenario, the government had to invest an additional 750 crores to construct the underpasses, the bridges, and even wildlife corridors to ensure that the tigers have free access and also reduce the animal-human conflict, right? Now, because of the lack of planning or because of probably lack of understanding of the scenario, the government had to end up investing a huge amount of money, an additional sum of 750 crores. Therefore, proper assessment of the biodiversity risks and mitigation measures at the appropriate time becomes a critical part in planning and investment. The second case study that I would like to also discuss is with regard to the Namjiang Chu project, which is in Tawang, Arunachal Pradesh. This was a project that was conceived in the year 2010, and it was a hydroelectric power project wherein there were 10 tributaries. Out of the 10 tributaries, they had plans of constructing around 2 to 3 major dams. Now, what was the issue because of this construction? As per the reports, it was stated that the black-headed crane is a critically endangered species, which basically is a migratory species from Tibet to Arunachal Pradesh. It travels during the winter season to lay the eggs. Now, because of this particular project, since there was no anticipation, since there was no proper studies that were undertaken, the government continued with the project, and thanks to the local protests and the issues raised, it was the project had to be halted. As on today, the project still remains incomplete and the project is stalled. Now, please understand this particular species, that is the black-necked crane, which Tawang is a hotspot of, was classified as a vulnerable species under the Wildlife Protection Act, and even under the IUCN, it is under the red list. Therefore, sustainable infrastructure, the scientific studies, the environment impact assessment, and the impact on the local communities have to be critically studied even before any kind of investments take place. Now, the green part of it, the green energy part of it, is not just from the perspective of the end product that we are consuming, but it starts off from the very initial part of the project itself. Starting from planning till the end product that is received, the green infrastructure plays a very critical role. Now, I will request, sir, any questions, any concerns would like
Excellent,
to ask?
Raghav. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
I think both Gayatri and Raghav have made a brilliant presentation. One of the issues that most of you would like to know is, do we have a legal definition of what green energy is? That's, I think, the biggest takeaway from this session, right? Should we have a definition? Should we categorize what is green and what is not? Like I earlier told you that all renewable energy need not be green energy, right? Many of you might be perplexed by this, or do we know what this means? I'm just asking, because Raghav has put that definition out in the slide, so I'm sure many of you would like to take that into consideration. Do we know what is green energy? Electrical energy from renewable sources, hydro storage technology notified by the government of India from time to time, and it attempts to replace fossil fuel. Yeah. So what is green about renewable? How do we categorize something as green energy? Come on, friends.
Good morning, sir.
Yes.
Sir, in context of green energy, government also considering hydro in context of large hydro. Previously, below 25 megawatt only considered for the green energy as per the MNRE definition. Now, in worldwide, all other countries also considering large hydro in context of green energy. Is it okay? That's why government also changed their view.
Fossil fuel.
Ecology
Hydro was
also
much before fossil fuel. See, before you could find oil, hydroelectricity was already something that was already generated. So yes,
this is a I think in middle view between the fossil fuel and
so I'll give you a challenge.
Green energy.
I'll give you a challenge. And unfortunately, at some point of time, we had biogas. Is biogas green energy? Come on, quickly. I want everyone to answer. Yes, no.
Yes, it is green energy.
Come on, everyone. 116 responses. Let's do it. Come on, friends. Participatory workshop.
Yes, it's a green energy.
Biogas is green energy.
Yes, green
No, biofuel, not Monica. Monica, biofuel is something else. I'll come to biofuel. Jet propper is not green, Monica, though it is a biofuel. I'm talking of biogas. Yeah. Okay. Yes. It's green. Friends, the answer is no.
Because it contains methane also.
Because it has a huge impact on methane emissions. So biogas is not green, though biogas is renewable. I hope you know what is biogas made of. Yes. I hope you know biogas. It's made of
methane.
It is made of cow dung. Amjad?
Cow dung.
Yes.
Cow dung.
So इसका पहले हम करते थे, ये रिन्यूएबल था, इससे गैस भी आता था, एनर्जी भी प्रोड्यूस कर सकते थे, आपके एलपीजी सिलेंडर के लिए ये एक अल्टरनेट था, बायोगैस. अमजद, ठीक है? So you will notice, Amjad, that though biogas it can be renewable, but in terms of, so it is not only CO2 emission that we are concerned about, friends, in ESG. We have to be concerned about other kinds of emissions.
Yeah, ozone depleting substances.
Methane emission is much more a critical, battle than CO2 emissions. And like Gayatri was saying, the agricultural sector may be the major contributor for methane emissions. And do you know that the global forum has come forward with a pact called the Methane Pact, and India has not joined that Methane Pact. So if some of you think that United States has got out of Paris Agreement, I saw in the chat box, and you criticize USA for leaving Paris Agreement, please note India has not joined the Methane Pact because we have a large dependent population on agriculture. So to reduce methane, straightforward as per an international agreement may not be possible immediately for us. We may get into transition, but we may not make commitments straightforward right now. So right now we may look at CO2 commitments, but to mix CO2 and methane is not going to be easy. So energy comes from various sources, and all forms of sources of renewable energy are not necessarily green energy. Please note it down. Okay. So biogas has implications, has challenges, and hence, anyway, so, look at the definition of what green is. If it can replace fossil fuel, maybe yes. But if it does not, and it's not green, maybe not. So I think those are some of the challenges that you have to take. Okay, so we go to the next presentation. Shortage of time. I'm sorry for all of these. We have Ragya Zadu and YG Muralidharan who have joined us here. They will be taking this last session together. It will be Ragya first and YG Muralidharan sir next. Ragya is a PhD scholar. She has done her specialization in nuclear energy, and YG Muralidharan is a very renowned consumer activist. He has actually fought for consumer rights in electricity. Now, this is a session that you must always look forward to, because I think finally ESG must benefit whom? Finally, ESG must benefit whom? Of course, we all live on planet, but please note, it must result in probably what I would call as affordable energy. For a consumer today, it is, see, electricity prices are a political manifesto point. Free electricity. Everyone wants free. Freebies are already there. So consumerism and energy is a critical factor, because affordability, see, ESG is fine, but affordability of energy is also very critical. That's why I keep saying in energy, there are 3 A's that are very important: availability, accessibility, and affordability. These are the 3 critical A's in the energy sector that governance must focus upon. I repeat, 3 A's: accessibility, availability, affordability. And in India, please note, we are a very price sensitive consumer market when it comes to energy. If the petrol prices go up 100, we immediately shout. Right? Affordability is critical in India because we still have a lot of people below the poverty line. So it's Ragya and Muralidharan who will be taking this session. But most importantly, before Ragya steps in, one important question, all of you must answer this in the chat box: is nuclear energy green energy? Come on.
The nuclear waste.
Yes, sir. Nuclear energy can be considered as green energy.
Chat box. Is nuclear energy green energy?
No.
That
The waste creates a lot of harm to the.
Is nuclear energy green energy? Please note, nuclear energy is having 0 carbon emission.
The nuclear waste.
Wait. In terms of your CO2 emissions and fines and Paris Agreement or other commitments, it has 0 carbon emission. Ritesh Shetty is here. Ritesh is here. He's also a nuclear energy expert, working with a very popular PSU. He has associated with us in the past. So look at his answer. He should lead you in coming to this conclusion whether nuclear energy is green energy, right? So please note, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change has categorized nuclear energy as an important alternate energy to fight climate action, or to bring climate action, right? So Ragya's presentation is just focused on that form of energy. I hope you can appreciate that discussion. And not to forget, friends, right now in our energy mix, as we call it, nuclear energy contributes at least 3% of our energy requirement, and it is slated to go up in the coming days, because I'm sure that is what the governance framework would permit us. Because finally, friends, please note, if it's not coal, right, renewable energy may not give you energy security. May not. Please note, we are trying to, but it may not. And hence, from coal, maybe the alternate is nuclear energy. So this is the proposition for the discussion that Ragya will take it forward.
Safety factors of the energy
yes, we will take
by
it
the
up.
nuclear
Don't worry. Those concerns are still there. But I think the world has realized that in case we have to move away from coal, then to bring in grid stability, to bring in energy security, nuclear could be one of the alternates that has to be.
But nothing has been done on the last 70, 80 years for this safety.
Yes, don't worry, sir. Don't worry. We'll talk about that. So, Ragya, it's over to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the nice question. It has made my job very much difficult and easy at the same time. So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ragya, and I am here to address everybody's curiosity and bias. And let me just begin by saying that when we listen to nuclear energy, it is basically three things. Just tell me if I am wrong. Chernobyl, and the Japanese bomb blasts, and the latest Fukushima that comes to mind. Apart from this, understanding anything about nuclear energy without being scared is very difficult. So in this time, if I can move forward, what I will just going to be this first slide to remind you of everything that Saram sir took in his first session. And to limit myself, I will say I'm going to limit myself to the nuclear perspective in India. And we will look abroad later, but let us focus on what is happening in the Indian perspective first. So first, definitely with environment, and I will urge everyone to maybe pay me a patient here, and let's keep our bias at one point, and we will take it up later when we open up a little bit for questions. So first, for environmental performance, for nuclear, I will look at emissions, energy efficiency, and the various environment impacts of it. For socials, I will go at your human rights, safety, everybody, like you've highlighted, the safety aspect, the health policies, and how the engagement of local communities has been when nuclear has been, and the nuclear power plants are thought about. And lastly, with the government's aspect, your compositions, your compliance records, how do we procure, process, what are the changes in the supply chains, etc., that have been and now will be later. Lastly, thanks to Madam Nirmala Sitharamanji today, who is presenting her wonderful budget and the economic survey report that actually came live lastly, which have highlighted that now private sector shall be invited to jointly invest in the Indian nuclear energy program. So this is something that I would urge that we are going to be looking forward to. Now, moving on to the environmental aspects of nuclear energy. Like Sir said, firstly, we have zero emissions. However, in the generation of this electricity, only in the generation part, there are zero emissions. And nuclear energy happens to be environmental friendly in this one sense. We have very strict environmental standards, like, for example, right now, till date, since 1947 till now, we happen to have many power plants which are currently functional in the country, and we have had no accidents as yet. That is also partly because the technology that we use is much different than the West. We have our indigenous PHWRs, or the pressurized heavy water reactors, that we use, and they have given us no accidents or mishaps till date. In 1991, however, there was a fire incident in Aurora, which we will come to later when we talk about our civil liability. Why nuclear energy today becomes a very important contestant to harbor in the to change the energy mixes, that this is a very energy dense source. Now, for our base load, right now, the base load electricity that is being generated is from coal. And why coal? Because it is a energy dense source. It will give you a lot of electricity or energy from a very small, from a limited amount of fuel that you're giving. Now, for example, in very layman terms, just to make my point easy to understand, if 1 kg of coal is giving you, say, supposedly 1 megawatt of electricity or power, 1 kg of nuclear fuel can actually have the potential of giving you 100 megawatts. So the fuel usage is less, the energy output is much more. Therefore, it becomes a consideration that why this will be a sustainable baseload. Now we have the question first that will come to your minds is that why not solar? Why not hydro? Why not CNG? Why not gas? Why not so many other options? Why nuclear? Because, it is dangerous. Now, firstly, let's answer that we fear the unknown. Since inception, nuclear energy in the country, the power plants or the very thin difference between the civil and the defense uses of nuclear energy, India has kept its program under a shroud. You don't know what is happening. What are the laws? Who are the people who are selecting this? What is going to happen? Where is the fuel coming from? Where is the fuel going? How are you extracting? Where are you taking it? So all of this information is not disclosed to people. Like, for example, with coal, you can see the trucks and the trains and the ladle, they're going, okay, this is going, the coal is going for a power plant. Where is the fuel coming from? What is going to happen? So all of this since 47 till now, however, transparency has increased, but it has in the formative years, there was a lot of bias that became that all we knew about nuclear energy was the defense usage of this, not about the civil using. So a lot of fear mongering became part of the sector, which first of all did not generate a lot of public confidence. So this nuclear energy definitely has a big potential of becoming baseload. And from the past 10 years, I would say, the increase of the your capacity has happened, however slow, but it definitely, even on all your international platforms, in our domestic climate initiatives and our adaptation and mitigation strategies, nuclear is not completely shut out. There is potential, but how and why, that is a question. How do we make, because this balance that earlier also was spoken about, in between the right to development and to right to have a clean environment, this balance is completely off. Now, India is neither a very developed country, nor we can call it a developing country. We are dangling somewhere in the middle. So it becomes even more important for us to maintain this balance of what is renewable, what is green, what is sustainable. These three things, which should be one, have become three diverse things. One is sustainable energy, which can be or cannot be renewable energy. Then becomes green. Again, it can be renewable, it can be non-renewable. So how do we find this balance? This sector of nuclear energy becomes a very beautiful candidate. It can actually become an answer to all of your climate issues. And to make sure, one confidence boosting fact is that, we don't have small institutions, but we have scientific institutions here who will monitor the health and environmental factors in the nuclear energy sector. However, some of the what I have highlighted in red also is are the challenges that we say. That the first and foremost, I will put that the EIA reports, as I'm sure you know, that before starting any major structure, any infrastructure, with it be it small or a big one, we have to conduct environment impact assessment reports. So nuclear energy, large infrastructure, it is a category A project, and extensive EIA reporting according to section 25, the guidelines of EIA that have to be completed are done. But however, if you look, the reports are very outdated, and the environmental data which is recorded and it is uploaded on the proposed sites of the SPC, of the state pollution control boards, and even with your central pollution control board, that data is very old. So we are still managing this as a challenge. And lastly, for large plants, like you have Naroda and you have all the other existing ones, even the proposed ones, the buffer area for these plants for environmental safety and to make sure that the radiation issues do not affect, and in case there is an accident, the area of such plant is very, very large. Therefore, acquisition of this land becomes a big challenge for the environmental aspects. Now, a good example here would be the proposed plant in Andhra Pradesh, which was in Mithi. There was a plant proposed initially in Mithi in Gujarat. Now, because of these two issues, majorly land acquisition, the locals had a huge support system and the government could not proceed with it. So that is a good example where land acquisition, because of it, the plant could not be pursued. However, that still got moved on to Andhra Pradesh, and now it is functioning. Now that it's an issue, but it is a big issue because land for the large plants. Now, lastly, I don't know if I'm going to get a lot of, scuffle on this plant, but investigative journalism in India is very dangerous because, you have, I'm sorry, I'm having some issue. One second. Yes, what's happening? Just please excuse me for 1 minute. This laptop of mine has a mind of its own sometimes. Yes. So, yeah, I was here and then I was here. Sorry. Yes. So investigative journalism, one big problem now because of social media, something happens here and within seconds it spreads like wildfire. So for a sensitive area like nuclear energy, it is very difficult to stop, people with cameras and mobile phones everywhere, reporting live of the incidents. Now, these people like us, they're common people, nuclear bomb, my God, accident, everybody's going to die in 100 years. Then you will have runs and reruns on prime time on TV, instigating even more of fear mongering. Good example over here, you will see this issue that happened in Ukraine. In Kyiv, during the war aspects that was going on, there was a news that the Chernobyl disaster area there has been a breach and there is a big scale that is happening and there is a lot of radioactivity which is happening. Although by the time the scientific people, the teams reached over there, it turned out to be a minor issue which got fixed later on. There was no problem. Sir, I have to interject here. I think my laptop is malfunctioning. It just keeps running. So is it okay if I share my slide like this? It is much easier to manage. Is it possible? Can you see? Can everybody see the slides on the screen?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, it is visible.
So it just keeps moving ahead. Anyways, next I will talk about the environmental law. Now, in the chat box before our session commenced, there was an issue that there is a lot of health issue. There are environmental factors. There is a waste issue. Now, first of all, let us debunk myths. And let us talk about waste first. Now that you've taken up waste, I will answer to that question first. That waste, see, nuclear cycles, like to generate nuclear electricity, there are two things. You have an open-ended cycle and you have a closed-ended cycle. Now, the West, basically the US and the other countries in the West, where nuclear power is more, capitalized and commercialized, they are an open-ended cycle. That means they will use fuel, they will generate electricity, and then they will throw away the waste. They will not keep the waste. They will not keep, they will throw away. That is why in waste management in the US right now, and France and these Western countries, waste generation in the nuclear industry is a big environmental problem. That, however, does not apply to the Indian scenario because we are a closed-ended cycle. What does this mean? It means that we believe in recycling this waste. So when we use nuclear fuel, we will generate the electricity that is needed. And once all of that is done and when there is waste, that waste is then stored in a container to be utilized as MOX or a MOX fuel later on in the third stage, where this MOX fuel is going to be used with more enriched uranium and then be used as fuel again. So it is a closed cycle. So you are not exactly discarding waste, which will have 50, 150, 100 years of afterlife, but that thing will be significantly reduced. So this is the Indian concept and very less is talked about it. That is why I would say that at this point, I can, or, if you can read about it also, about closed-ended fuel cycles, it is much more sustainable. Now, what Saram sir I heard and Ramesh sir, they used to say this one very interesting thing, that no energy source or no infrastructure development or no development is 100% green. It is all about balancing. Like, for example, an activity will cause 100 units of damage to the environment. So our task becomes to find such an activity or do this activity in such a process that instead of 100, there is only 50 or less than 50 units of environmental damage. Now, yes, there is environmental damage for nuclear energy, if you see, but in case of an accident which may happen, if a certain compliance may not be followed. Now, on a may or on something which may or may not happen, is it wise to immediately give up your hopes that no, we can't do this because this may happen? This particular point was highlighted by the Supreme Court also in the 2013 judgment of G. Sundarajan versus Union of India. This was about the Kudakulam unit, which is in Tamil Nadu. It is one of the very, very good, very well functioning nuclear power plants in the country right now, using the Russian technology. Our plant is working perfectly well. There are no issues. But when the third and the fourth units were being commissioned, this individual, Mr. G. Sundarajan, he filed a court case saying that this is not viable. It is causing a lot of damage. And I'm sorry for this, but what the damage that he was saying was that the plant is giving out hot water from the reactor and it is spoiling the marine ecology over there. We don't know what are so basically he cited a lot of environmental concerns around the plant. Now, what happened was this became a very, very important, I would say, a cornerstone in the development of environmental jurisprudence in the country, where the Supreme Court ordered an expert panel and an expert commission to revalue and re-aspect and reanalyze all the environmental factors about the nuclear plant in that particular state. And after a very long discussion, a lot of process and a lot of studying and a lot of surveying that happened, the Supreme Court gave the judgment that just because of an activity which may or may not happen in the future, it is foolish to stop development in the beginning. We need to have faith and trust on the technology, on the scientists who are working, and we have to give an ample amount of chance to the environmental regulators as well to prove their mettle. So in that ways, more attention was asked to be given on the environmental factors and the regulators to ensure that the plant is following all compliances at all times. Therefore, the compliance for nuclear sector is different from that of other large infrastructure, because with nuclear now, periodically, almost every year, plants have to shut down for maintenance and for a survey of the environment. Now we come to the first the law for nuclear energy sector, that is the Atomic Energy Act. Now, I am one of those people who raises a lot of questions that when we talk about nuclear, why don't we have an environmental law for nuclear? Coal is taken care of, like environment. We have a lot of, environmental regulations for coal. We have a lot of environmental regulations for hydro. But with nuclear energy, everybody is highlighting, oh, you cannot go for nuclear because we have environmental impacts. The environmental law itself, the Atomic Energy Law itself, the Civil Liability for Nuclear Damage Act, these three major environmental laws, which are supposed to regulate the nuclear energy sector, they have no concept of environmental conservation in any one of them. Like if you look at the Atomic Energy Act, it is the oldest act of 1962. I'm highlighting it over here. It does not consider environment or environment protection or environment conservation in itself. Second, the CLND, or the Civil Liability for Nuclear Damage Act, it's very recent in 2010. It is a fully parliamentary law. That means it is perfect to the T. It is so perfect in its concept of no fault liability to ensure that the last major environmental disaster that happened was the Bhopal gas tragedy. Something like that should not happen again. So the lawmakers made this act so difficult that it is absolutely, it's like a knot. Because of this, no international country, no international law. Oh my God, what is happening? Did you see that? I think my computer is possessed or something. 1 second, excuse me.
That's fine, don't worry.
Okay, that's kind of gone. Anyways, I was talking about, it had my ideas on CLND Act itself. So I will speak. So in CLND, the Civil Liability for Nuclear Damage Act 2010, this is supposed to be the most decisive, the most umbrella legislation, as I can call it, for all things nuclear. That nuclear also, you will understand the lawmakers are now, what they're saying is, instead of making environment protection and conservation the central point, they have made liability and compensation the central point. So do you see the disarray that the environment is not being, you don't have the first topic, does not become sustainability. Now that is much later. Right now, in the economic survey of 2024-25 also, if you look at chapter 10, page number 284, which is talking about climate mitigation and adaptation strategies, there is a lack of supportive ecosystem. There is lack of supply chains, and your environmental sustainability and environmental conservation in that sentence comes last. Economic first, job opportunities later. Security of energy is the first topic, but environment protection becomes the last one. Similar in CLND also. This act, because of this particular act, the largest nuclear power program that was supposed to be in the world, this is the biggest nuclear plant that was supposed to be set up, that was in Jaitapur, Maharashtra. It was a 9,000 megawatt electric project, which was to be the largest nuclear park in the world. Why it got stopped? All the studies, EIA, compliances, everything was done in 2010. But it was the international countries who were having these supply chain agreements with us. They made an objection that this act is too much. Specifically, your section 17 of this particular act, which said it had something called as the right of recourse against supplier. Now, this particular act is supposed to safeguard the country against any nuclear disaster that can happen later. How? By operator or in the government of India, who is the operator, will shirk its responsibility of the accident and give it to the supplier. Who is the supplier? Anybody outside, any foreign country who has ever supplied anything for this particular reactor where the accident has happened, that supplier is going to be responsible for this whole incident that has happened. And how much will be the compensation? That is for India, it is about 300 million special drawing rights, SDR. That is roughly equivalent to 14, we say cap of 1500 crores. Anything above will be forgiven if they are part of the INIS or the risk. It is a risk transfer mechanism. So basically, if there is an accident, what will happen? What is going to be your compensation? The act basically gives you an overview that, we are all shirking our responsibility. We are going to channel this particular liability. So because of this, the nuclear plants right now, which were awaiting investment, which were about all the studies are done, everything has been, finalized, they are still not operable. The new ones, the ones which are working perfectly fine. And this, I would say that that is one of the reasons why the sector is not developing. Not because we don't have technology, but because the management and the technical advisories coming from the government of India with relation to our international relations with other countries, that is being faulted. So our law remains, inclusive only of the liability and compensation schemes, but it is not opening up to the advancing technology of the power sector. Moving on to, the management and the regulation of the energy sector. Now, sir, we have mentioned now the economic survey that I've said, they have spoken about 3 issues. That is that we will not have land enough, and we will not have supportive ecosystems, and we will have to depend on the import of uranium. Now, another good news which was reported much earlier was that the government of India now is looking at private sector to invest in this particular sector of nuclear energy to make what we call as BSR or Bharat small reactors. This is similar to what we have this SMR or the small modular reactor of which is accepted internationally as the next big thing in the nuclear energy generation sector. What we will do in India is that what is the difference? Now, what is an SMR? Anything which is smaller than 200, say 50 megawatt or a 25 megawatt or a 70 or a 220 megawatt reactor is going to be a small modular reactor. Now, the difference in between existing large and the now new coming 220 reactors would be that these small reactors would be assembled on site. They will be a much smaller apparatus as compared to the giant apparatus of the large nuclear facilities today. So that will give us a boost in two ways. First, we'll be able to have better environmental regulations. It will be less environmental, the conservation issues will not be much of an issue. It will use less land. And thirdly, this is where we are inviting PPP, development in the PPP mode, that is the public-private sector, which will have verified supply chains. And these industries itself, like L&T, and NTPC, other papers, which are also, not NTPC, but L&T, you have Kalyani Industries. They are already supplying critical components to the nuclear energy sector, to NPCIL. So they are already involved, but now they will be mostly involved for their investment because they have funds for investment. And secondly, for their already established technical expertise in this sector. So, and for there go your supply chain issues. Secondly, fuel is a big issue. Uranium is developed and it is mined in limited countries only. Yeah, India is a biggest, we have the biggest, one of the biggest ores of thorium, but that will come later on when we will have achieved our third stage. So to bridge the gap between the supply of uranium or the raw material, right now, NTPC and CCTE, this is a company from Mr. Mehul Shah. He's an Indian right now working in the US. It's an American company by an Indian, of course. They have come into a strategic partnership. Now, what they will do is they have this thing called something new called as Advanced Nuclear Energy Enriched Life. It is like a fuel, which is what I spoke about earlier. It is mixed fuel. This is leftovers thorium, which is enriched by your other uranium and becomes a much more, what do we say? It becomes much more enriched and much more better than enriched uranium. So it is more sustainable, if I can use that word, in sustainable to generate as to become fuel. Now, with this strategic partnership, we can also look at in the future to have less issues and challenges. Now, nuclear sector can look at development from 3 to at least 7 to 10% if all of these, investment projections, which are now looking brighter, they also actually get to develop. Lastly, the industrial practices which are challenges right now, which we need to look at, is a lack of transparency and accountability in this sector. We are still governed by AERB, their safety codes, and the Department of Atomic Energy. We don't see a lot of information flowing in and out as to where is the fuel, whether the fuel is dangerous, what is happening, how are we going to, what is the management. There is a lack of stakeholder integration, I'll say. Now, what do we mean by stakeholder integration? Do you hear a lot of CPCB reports being published about the nuclear sector? The plants that are functioning right now? Do we have reports from groundwater authorities? Do we have reports which is mandated under the Environment Protection Act for the state pollution boards to be actively involved in the cities? So cities like Narora, in Bulandshahr, your Kaiga, Andhra, do you hear about the SPCBs bringing on their reports? Even if you go on their websites, they have not uploaded the data. Not that the data, now we know, if you look at them individually, we know that the data is not bad. Everything is working smoothly. But because they are not doing the job, the common people who want to know that, that information gets blocked. There is no communication in between the sector regulators and the common people. Therefore, there is not even a centralized policy, let's say. Even if I talk about the energy sector, a very good policy that came out in the 2010, it still remains a draft policy. Everybody has taken inspiration from the draft document, but it was never finalized. You have the solar mission, you have a plan for hydro, you have a plan for your gas, for natural gas, for all your renewables, you have a specific policy directive on which we can think about making or changing the institutional framework. The same is not happening in nuclear sector. Last, there are outdated and obsolete impact assessment studies. My favorite case over here is of Jetapur. which all the studies, everything, you would see the Jaitapur report, which is published. If you want to go, you can check it on the website. It is the most comprehensive one. It has a separate study on air and environment. It is separate on emissions, separate on bio, separate on socio-economic, separate on demographic studies. But then nothing happened after that. Those studies stopped in 2010. Now this is 2024. How many years have passed? Do you think the demographics would have remained the same? Or the flora and fauna natural would be the same? It wouldn't be. So why is it not working? Partly our fault, partly I will not stir up any controversy over here. So the good part is that we have to focus on is the less dependency on international relations and bottlenecks in diplomatic channels. How? By doing this in-house, like we have been doing since 1947. If we keep it in-house now with the PPP sector coming in, this is giving us hope that there will be lesser reliance on the diplomatic and the international relations with other countries, and the indigenous development of critical components, facilities, and fuels. We already have a long-term experience in 220 megawatt reactors. Now, this is going to be in the news because BMRs are going to be of 220 megawatt capacity only. So we already have the technology and the management. And here I would like to, I forgot to mention this earlier when I was talking about the no centralized policy. The biggest loophole and the biggest challenge and problem for all three, for the law management and the environment conservation management, is that the nuclear energy sector runs and believes and swears by the safety codes which are formulated by the AERB, or the Atomic Energy Regulatory Board. These policies and these safety codes, they are changed every other year to stay in tandem with the growing technology. However, they are followed domestically by the power plants who are working by NPCIL, but these safety codes are not part of law yet. Our law remains the same, which is the Atomic Energy Act of 62, various their outdated policies, rules, and regulations. So if these safety codes become law, a lot of issue and challenge of the outdated outdated legal issues in the country, that will be taken care of. Lastly, I would like to say that this is Melty, the polar bear, who says that only you or uranium can prevent climate change. Climate change at this time, I will say, is not the only bad effect of global warming. It is one part of it. And right now, if you have any questions about safety or waste management issues about the nuclear energy sector, I would be open to taking them because there are very, very less things happening in the legal development of the sector. So I don't have a lot of policy initiatives and points to share with you, apart from these few things that I have tried to cover in my time. So if we have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Yeah, we go to the chat box to address the same because of constraint of time. Thank you so much for that presentation. I hope a lot of us have now got some insights on what this sector is, and it's something that India should look forward to, and also look at especially guidelines probably for nuclear energy with the ESG component that is going to be applicable, because we always think nuclear energy is a special category of energy. Other forms of energy are another category. That is because of the Atomic Energy Act, AERC, because of the resource that is used for atomic energy, which is exclusively with the government. There is no privatization yet attempted over there. So maybe a separate, direction of ESG may be something that is required in that case.
And so ESG forms a very less, contribution, because ESG studies are limited to the EIA reports. Till the time that is done, this is considered. After that, there is no, there's no policy, because we don't have foreign investments or we don't have private investments coming here. So this need does not arise. But with the private sector now, presumed to be now getting involved, we can hope for more ESG principles to be applicable and, make this a more viable sector for investment.
And plus, if the government has now exclusive domain on this, they can lead the ESG governance framework, isn't it? So that's something that the private sector can follow. With that, we'll move on to our last presentation. YG Muralidharan is with us. Sir, a warm welcome to you, and we would request you to interact with our participants and share your experience as well. Sir, it's over to you.
Okay. Good morning, Sai Rambat. Are you able to hear me?
We are able to hear you, sir. Maybe could you switch your video on?
Yes. Now? Able to see me?
No, sir. We can't see. We only.
Okay, now?
Illa, sir. We are
But
unable
no video,
to.
no video.
No video.
No video. No video.
Sir, do you have a presentation to share?
Yeah, I have already sent it to Gayatri.
Okay, Gayatri, can you start sharing the presentation, please? Sir, we'll use the presentation, sir. It's okay if the video cannot come through.
ಅವ್ರು ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರಾ?
ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ, 1 ನಿಮಿಷ ಕೊಡಿ ಸರ್.
Okay, okay. There's only 6 or 7 slides, sir.
No problem, sir. Gayatri will share it. Sir, you can start your presentation. She will be sharing the slides. Please.
Okay. Anyway, I will make a presentation. Thank you for Sai Rambat and Girish and Miss Girish for this opportunity. And I have been hearing the presentations made by these people, and a very excellent presentation has gone. And of course, I think I am an odd man out. My presentation will be purely from the demand side and very, very preliminary. And except the thing is, subject is electricity governance structure. So I would like to share a few slides about the governance structure in the electricity sector in India. And the credibility of joining this program is 2 things. One is, I am right now implementing a project called the stakeholder involvement in, involvement in transition to clean energy. This is the project that is going on for the past 1 year, and it will be extended by another year. That is in Karnataka. I am in charge of implementing this. So the experience shared in these things also will be shared with you. This is one thing. First thing is, electricity historically has been governed by 2 central laws, the Indian Electricity Act 1910 and Electricity Supply Act 1948. So this is almost over. It has been removed from our law books, but at least this is historically this is one. And we had some private enterprises in Mumbai, Calcutta, and Ahmedabad, and also in Surat, where they were supplying electricity. Of course, with the constitution coming in 70 years ago, the electricity was included in the concurrent list at entry 38 in the 7th schedule of the constitution. I think most of you people know about it. And then what we went was somewhere in 1999 or 2000, we had another act called Electricity Reforms Act, through which regulatory commissions were set up. Next, Gayatri. Electricity. Next, electricity governance was there. So the top level is you have what is known as the Ministry of Power, responsible for the development of electricity in the country. It is concerned with planning, policy formation, processing of project, monitoring, and implementation of power projects. Somewhere in the middle, we had another one, what is known as the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, which was created to govern all matters relating to green energy or renewable energy. These are all some of the fundamental structures that is available in the governance of electricity in the country. Okay, I don't want to expand more or tell more about all these things, since you are aware of these things, and particularly the legal aspects of all these things. And then we have what is known as 1 minute. There is some post there. Okay, next, Gayatri. We know that electricity structure has undergone some changes in the past few years, right from 1999 to 2003 or 2024. The first was with the liberalizing electricity generation by allowing private and foreign investments. The second saw the enactment of the Electricity Reforms Act, under which the Independent Electric Regulatory Commission (CEERAs) were created. The third phase started with the enactment of the Electricity Act 2003, which is a comprehensive law to regulate almost all aspects of the electricity sector. I think 2003 has been amended for 2-3 times, and the rules have been framed. Of course, I am not going into the details of all that amendments. Right now, the Act stays controlling the governance of the electricity sector in the country. Okay. So central and state government is involved in policy formulation, regulatory commission, both at the central and state level, issue licenses. In fact, electricity regulatory commissions have become the more powerful structures in the governance of the electricity sector. Because they are the legally empowered to issue licenses, set the tariff, prescribe operational standards, consumer protection and monitoring compliance, and etc. Almost all activities have come under the electricity, regulatory governance issues. Then we have what is known as operational centers, like the national and regional road dispatch centers, manage the grid, ensuring efficient electricity flow across the country. The last is utilities for generating, transmission and distribution of electricity. For example, in Karnataka, we have KPTCL, are the 5 companies for distribution, which is also called as retail distribution, and we call ESCOMs, but it is also called as DISCOM, that is distribution of electricity. And in Karnataka, we call ESCOM, electricity supply companies. These are all the basic structures which is governing. In fact, we have other issues like, separate institutions or development organizations for renewable energy at the state level also. Next. Now, how this ESG, coming to the main part, how this ESG has any relation to the governance of the electricity sector. So in any way, it already been mentioned that it is used to measure an organizational environmental social impact. Then whether the organization is operating as a steward of environment and covers even like climate change, greenhouse, and all those things. The second is social, that the impact of the organization has on people, culture, and communities, and looks at the social impact of diversity, inclusivity, and human rights. Finally, it is governance, which refers to how the organization is directed and looks at the corporate governance factors. Of course, it includes compensations of private sector and all those things. More important, as far as electricity is concerned, what is this environmental impact of the electricity on the country or the society, and the social impact and the governance. These 3 are, of course, important as far as India is concerned. Now, I would like to see, India's commitment to achieve net zero emissions is 2070 as stated in the Paris Agreement. Somebody mentioned about this Paris Agreement, but I am taking only one point from that. Now, climate change, of course, why it is ESG is required. India is particularly vulnerable to climate change. Okay. Companies with strong environmental practices adopting renewable energy can reduce the emission. This is one. There are social challenges are there. The social challenges include poverty, inequality. Sairam Bhatt was already mentioning about the 3 A's, affordability, availability, and accessibility. So of course, all these things comes under the social challenges. The last is the governance. How far our electricity sector is transparent and have the ethical conduct and essential for economic growth. So these are all the issues that we need to look into. But I am looking at only from the what I can say, from the demand side of the electricity rather than the supply side of electricity. How people view these changes are ESG in Indian conditions. Next. Now, let me now take up what has been done by the government or the private entities in India as far as ESG is concerned. Before that, I would like to know how ESG can be successful in India. All those things I'll mention in the next 2 slides. One is NTPC has set a target of achieving 60 gigawatts of energy by 2032. It has planted over 29 million trees to offset carbon emissions. Socially, NTPC has focused on community development, providing healthcare and education facilities. Fine. Solar Energy Corporation of India has commissioned over 10 gigawatt of solar projects. It is also focused on social inclusivity by providing training programs for rural youth. In fact, today's newspaper, and as far as this economic survey is concerned, the Selco companies' achievements have been highlighted in the economic survey, what they have done for renewable energy. Next. Measures taken by the private sector as far as ESG is concerned. For example, RIL, Carbon Capture and Utilization Initiative, which converts carbon dioxide into useful products, showcasing its commitment to environmental sustainability. Tata Power has 30% of its energy portfolio in clean energy sources, has implemented community-centric programs such as solar electrification, benefiting over 50,000 households. Adani has a portfolio of 20 gigawatt of solar and wind energy projects. It has pledged to invest $20 billion in renewable energy. It is also focused on social inclusivity by providing skill development programs in local communities near its project, ensuring sustainable development. ReNew Power has installed over 10 gigawatts of renewable energy project, reducing carbon emissions by 15 million tons annually. So this is just a basic status or basic statistics about the government initiative and the private sector initiative as far as your ESG is concerned. In that, more importantly, for environmental issues. Let's come to next one. What are the regulatory commissions have done or the DISCOMs have done for ESG? I am just giving a few regulatory commissions examples, not all. You see, GERC, that is Gujarat Electricity Regulatory Commission, has implemented policy for solar energy, including introduction of feed-in tariffs and net metering for rooftop solar installations. Now there was a question: what is the electricity regulatory commissions are doing for mandating the DISCOMs to buy renewable power? Each regulatory commission has its own percentage. In Karnataka, we have at least 10% of the requirement is to be purchased by the renewable energy sources. This is one. RERC, Rajasthan Electricity Regulatory Commission, has facilitated large-scale projects by offering competitive tariffs and simplifying approval process. This is very important. Approval process. I'll come back to that later on. Tariff regulation and affordability. MERC, that is Maharashtra Electricity Regulatory Commission, has introduced time of day tariffs to encourage off-peak electricity consumption, reducing the load on the grid. These are all part of environmental issues. KERC, that is Karnataka Electricity Regulatory Commission, has implemented cross-subsidy mechanism to ensure that low-income households receive electricity at subsidized rates. Going further, now some of the states have already providing some free power to the people. I think that needs to be discussed a little bit, how it will impact your ESG in the country. Free power. I am just a few days back, I was in Polar about the project which I mentioned earlier. I asked one question: how many of you read your electricity bills? Some NGOs and groups. Nobody were reading their bills itself. Why? Because at least earlier, they used to read the last date for payment and the amount that is to be paid. Now, nobody is bothered because there is no last date for payment, because there is no payment at all. So, who is bothered? Now, ESG, what is the impact of this free power on ESG? That needs to be discussed in detail. Next, madam. Energy efficiency and demand side management. Andhra Pradesh has introduced energy efficient standards for industries and commercial establishment. It has reduced energy consumption. That's what they say. PERC has launched demand side management, that is programs including incentives for energy efficient appliances and LED lighting. Other factor is that grid stability and integration of renewables. Kerala has implemented regulations for grid connected rooftop solar systems, ensuring seamless integration with state's power grid. Again, Madhya Pradesh has introduced regulations for energy storage system to address the intermittency of solar and wind energy. So we are talking about the solar and wind energy. There are certain basic concepts that we need to understand as far as these renewable sources are concerned. Is there a guarantee that you have renewable energy throughout the year? The commitment may be there, but do we have it? So this is one important issue we need to look into, because renewable energy, as far as affordable is concerned, what it is. Can people afford renewable energy? Second thing is, it is available, that is availability of renewable energy. Of course, the third last one is accessibility. Can everybody can get it? So these are all the issues that that needs to be discussed over a period of time. Support for rural electrification and social inclusivity. This comes to around the social issues I'm talking about. In ESG, this is about yes. Orissa has supported rural electrification programs, of course, including deployment of decentralized renewable energy systems in remote areas. Bihar has implemented policies to provide electricity to low-income households at subsidized rates. Of course, every state is doing this one. And improving energy access is one of India's most economically challenged states. Now come to these governance issues, that is what is called as financial health of DISCOM. Performance-based incentives for DISCOMs to reduce transmission and distribution losses, that is HERC. Telangana state has implemented cost-reflective tariffs to ensure financial sustainability of DISCOMs while protecting consumer interest. This is as far as the governance issues are concerned, but there are more about governance issues in the next slide, of course.
What is decentralized renewable energy system?
What is?
Decentralized renewable energy.
Decentralized means instead of drawing power from one single source, there may be some district-wise or circle-wise or something like the decentralized system. That is what. So that anyway, that is not what very successful in those states also where it is increased, but they are trying to make it more affordable so that your transmission distribution losses is reduced. That is what. Next.
It could also mean you generating your own power.
Yes.
Right now, you can have rooftop solar power as well.
I have one thing, one or two issues before apart from my slides I'm telling. So now, for example, the CERC, I was just going through some of the information that is available for ESG. Now, how many regulatory commissions have come out with ESG reports in about their states' DISCOMs? Have anybody seen this? I don't find except NTPC and Reliance, in the government sector, the reports itself are not available as far as ESG is concerned. Except, of course, NTPC has done a good one. None of the state government electricity regulatory commissions have a report prepared as far as ESG is concerned, how the electricity supply companies are following it, that is, DISCOMs are following it. This is one, I think, CEERA Bhatt and Gayatri should look into. Why this information is not being provided. As far as governance is concerned, CEERA Bhatt was telling about availability, affordability. I add another one, what is known as competence among the people. It is competence as far as participating in the electricity regulatory process so that it becomes transparent. So we have enough of information, enough of papers, enough of theoretical consideration, but how this moves or how this gets reflected in the hearings is very, very important. Right now, some 6 or 7 people or 3 or 4 people have given their versions. How this gets reflected in the electricity regulatory hearings. So that is very important. That is how ESG can be improved and governance structures can be improved only by giving our testimony before the regulatory commissions. So that requires capacity. So I think ESG will be successful when we compel the regulatory commissions to come out with reports about the various practices by the DISCOMs, and then people confronting the statistic that is given with the real or the practical issue that is raising in the ground level. I was referring to some paper in Ghana. What is the ideal energy governance and the reality in many countries? For example, Dr. CEERA Bhatt, can you please look into this one? There is a good paper. They have given some 6 parameters to assess the governance of the electricity regulatory commissions or the state governments. One is planning. That is planning of the energy, how plan is done. How planning is done as far as purchase of electricity is concerned, power is concerned. The second is procurement. How procurement is done. Third, dispatch of the power generated, how it is done. human resources, of course, metering, billing, and collection at the consumer level or at the industry level. Then how tariff is set. So these are all the governance indicators which should go into the ESG. And how we look into these parameters very, very important. For example, what is the governance as far as a tariff determination process is concerned? How many people participate? What are the issues they raise? Is there any methodology to understand the problems of the consumers or industries? How far their objections are reflected in the tariff order? So these are all the things that you should take into account before moving to the legal aspects. For example, now meter billing and what is the metering? No, there is other technical point, what is called a dispatch. How electricity...
we cannot see your screen.
So these are all some of the issues that I think I would like to flag in. These are all merely questions because the time is short for me to explain. The experience gained in the Electricity Regulatory Commission for the past, for 10 years has made me to flag these issues. But unfortunately, there is no time for me to explain this one. I think this forum will start thinking on these lines. And one small question, how many of we people have participated in Electricity Regulatory Commission proceedings?
How many of you have participated in Electricity Regulatory Commission proceedings? Sir wants to know. The nation demands to know. Please answer. How many of you out of the 100? Amjad says no, not yet.
Yeah. Anyway, this is only to just get your view. This is the problem with all the whole sector, whole the country, because I find in a city like Bangalore, which has 1.3 crore consumers of electricity, hardly a dozen people go before the commission for hearing and submission of their objections. This is same for all over the country. So how we are going to improve the governance, how we are going to improve the environmental impact on the electricity? I think first step is we need to participate in the process. For participation, information is required and capacity is to be built. So I think the National Law School and CEERA should start building the capacity of the people and drawing from technical, economic, and financial sectors to question these things. For example, last point I would like to know, governance can improve only with citizen participation. There are regulations issued by the electricity companies. Even now there is 2-3 regulations. I find very, very few people, only maybe one organization like Prayas from Pune are the only organization which is filing their suggestions or application. Maybe there's another one in Andhra Pradesh. It's called, I think it is called something People's Power or something like that. I don't remember. Power Monitoring Group, it is called PMG. So they are the 2-3 organizations or people who technically competent people who are questioning these decisions, regulations, and the tariff structure. Unless the pressure is built on the regulatory commissions, our policy will not change. So that is what the sum and substance of ESG, whether it is environment, whether it is social, or whether it is governance. So that is what. So somebody has to regulate the regulators. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for that wonderful presentation and sharing your ideas from a very rich practical experience, both protecting consumer interest, also protecting the interest of the regulator in CEERA-NLSIU. So that is coming to the close of the presentation for the day, friends. I think we are almost on time.
Sir, one.
Yes. Yeah.
May I speak?
Yes, tell me.
Sir, one very important part that I think over here is that we have been talking about energy generation since all this time. But one very important link is that however we create the energy, the transmission channel should go through this ESG norms, right?
So transmission lines are only connecting lines.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
maybe the
correct.
transmission.
I know.
So transmissions may have issues of radiation and other things, but we'll come to transmission once we clear production. So you
All
start from
right.
the bottom and then you reach the top of the pyramid, right? So every sector, be it distribution, transmission, generation, storage, for that matter. Don't forget
Right.
storage. In terms of renewable energy, the capacities to store renewable energy has been something that the government has been working on. Because if renewable energy has to give you grid stability, it has to be the backup to coal. Then energy storage, which the government is investing right now for renewable sector, is going to be the primary purpose. Okay, so this sector is quite a challenging sector. It's not an easy sector to comprehend. It has various dimensions to it. There are various players to it, and hence the government, at least right now, is making a lot of initiative on all fronts, as the case is. Okay, so all of these would be relevant and important. But before we close for the day, I'm sure you may have some questions. You are free to use the chat box to raise these questions for any of the speakers. So I'll give you 2 minutes. If anyone has any queries for any of the speakers today in this workshop, please use the chat box quickly. I'll give you a couple of minutes to raise any queries, but preferably in the chat box. Because of the numbers that we have. See, 104 is still a big number, no? So I hope you'll appreciate that we cannot allow everyone to unmute. Because I think we all have enough energy, right? And in the questions, that energy should not be misused. So let us store it and use it in the chat box. On green energy, Sunil, okay. Raghav, would you just want to step in? There is one question on what green energy is. If you have Raghav still with us, okay. Or I can take it up.
So may I?
Yes. Yes.
Sir,
yes.
In not going by technical terms and very many definitions of it, I believe green energy is the answer to the kind of energy which will give us the least amount of environment damage and most amount of problem solved. So whichever energy, be it coal in its new form of coal gasification and green green ways and sustainable ways of generating coal energy from coal today, which Professor Srikanth from NIAS used to talk about. He talked about the green ways of generating electricity from coal also.
Yes.
So in definition purposes, even coal can be green.
Correct.
While as solar, where the world is going crazy about solar is actually a ticking time bomb if you look at from green energy, because there is no waste management rules about it. So green in the safest of definition happens to be the energy which gives us least units of environment damage to most units of challenges which are cleared. So more energy, less environment degradation is green energy.
Excellent, excellent. I think that's the best takeaway that we have had so far. One of the things is about whether I keep repeating this. See, when we talk about ESG as a governance framework, it is a governance framework that applies to government policies. It applies to entities and corporations. It applies to individuals as well. So I think, unless all stakeholders come together, including investors, bankers, workers, I don't think any of these ESGs are going to be in reality, because don't forget that it is easy to get ESG compliance on paper, but very difficult to get that in practice. So yes, I think green energy is all about the energy transition to a cleaner, better, low carbon or low emission kind of an energy. So whichever is reducing your carbon footprint, whichever is reducing your emissions as say as measured 20 years back, would be considered as green. So let us ask this question to all the audience. How many of you think India must continue to have thermal power plants? Do you think that's good for ESG? Thermal power, coal-based? like Raghu is saying, coal gasification if possible. Should we have it or should we not have it? Required Ritesh. Ritesh comes from the industry, so he knows the imperative that is required to meet the energy demands of 1.5 or 4 billion Indians. In the current scenario, it is needed. So, friends, all of these considerations, Ragya's nuclear consideration, Ritesh is very much for coal. This is based on resource availability also. Don't forget that. See, you may have the best of objectivities, but you must also have access to the resources, right? What does India have? What kind of resources are there in this country to give you energy security, right? If we are dependent upon crude oil to be imported, that is because we don't have crude oil, so we are importing it. So how do you otherwise give energy to 1 billion Indians? Okay, so let me ask all of you friends, do you have right to energy as a human right? Muralidharan would be very much interested in this. As a consumer, do we have right to energy as a fundamental right? Article 21 does that give you? It gives you right to life. Does it give you right to energy? Vaibhav said right to electricity. So it is not energy but electricity. Right to live with dignity. But what about energy? So can we ask this from the government? Is it some kind of a right to energy? Is the government bound to give you energy? Bound to give you electricity? Or is it the access to electricity and access to energy? Which is the right? Okay. Now, friends, the qualifying question of this workshop, I would like to ask all of you is, see, when I say, does a citizen have the right to water? And see, it's an analogy that you can draw. We in environmental law say, please note it down, we don't say right to water. We say right to clean drinking water. So how many of you think that we have a right to clean energy? It's not just energy. You're getting what the point I'm trying to drive you to think about. Should we have right to clean energy? Right? As citizens who care for the future generation, who care for common but differentiated responsibility under the Paris Agreement, if we are to ask this in a context of governance, a political debate constitutionally, is it right to clean energy? Right? I think the future is right to clean energy. And I think this is where the entire framework should be focused upon. And I think we are all concerned about it, that clean energy should be the future energy. And we should all work towards the same. So the legal mandate, the framework, the management tools, the policies, the practices, the reporting guidelines, the sustainability should all be working towards the same, right? So with this, I think we should end for the day, but we should meet tomorrow as well at the same time, 10 o'clock, to take this workshop forward. We have very eminent speakers coming tomorrow. Raj Singh Niranjan is going to start tomorrow's workshop, followed by Pavitra. Then we have Jay, Gayatri KK, and Rohit Kamath as well. So it's a short day, half a day, but with too many speakers that we have invited. Everyone has obliged to our request for this short presentation and interaction with all of you. So quickly, so far, how has been the workshop? Were there some takeaways, learnings today? Can I get a short
request
feedback?
to share the today's video by till evening.
Sir, we'll come to that.
Sir.
We'll come to that. Don't worry. All of that will be done. While you say you have right to energy, I say you have the right to information. So education and information go hand in hand. We will definitely give it to you. But so far, has the time been well spent? Has this been informative? Has it been useful, insightful? What is it? Please give us a short feedback in the chat box, because that will help us to prepare for tomorrow. Yes, the recordings are going to be available. Don't worry.
Sir, it is excellent.
Great. No, this is very encouraging for us as organizers. Because it should be useful of your time, and it should be useful of the time of the speakers as well. So thank you so much for that feedback. Yes, thank you. Excellent. I'm so
thank
grateful.
You very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
so
sir.
Looking forward to your active participation tomorrow as well. We will also look forward to some learning from tomorrow's session as well. So with that, thank you everyone today. YG Muralidharan, thank you so much. Ragya, Raghav, Gayatri, Vikas, thank you so much for your presentation. Thanks to everyone in the in the audience who have been taking part. Thank you very much. We'll end for the day. Thanks to the NPTEL team. Akshay, thank you so much for the coordination. We'll meet tomorrow, Akshay, 10
Sir,
minutes.
can we expect the recording today? That we will go through before
the workshop
tomorrow.
has to get completed before the recordings will be up. But we will give you the link for the recording. Don't worry. Once the
No, in case if you share any content today, which will be done today, that helps us the revising before tomorrow.
Okay. So Vikas, can you in the chat box put the energy book link, our energy book, so that some kind of preparation for tomorrow will be done. Yes, no, we have requested NPTEL to give us the recording, and the recording will be shared as well. No problem. We'll do that. Give us some time for that. But in the meantime, we have published a book on energy law and policy, though it's not currently updated, but some of you can do an online reading. And if you want copies of these book, they are available, and you can email Gayatri Girish. She should be able to give a hard copy of this book as well. Okay, so she can dispatch it, she can post it to you. So the online thing is there in the chat box. Please see that. You can click this and you can access the energy law and policy book published by CEERA-NLSIU. Gayatri Girish will be providing her email ID as well. And you can write to this email ID. And if you want a hard copy of this book, you can contact her. Gayatri, your email ID in the chat box, please. Badila. Has it come? Yes, her email ID is also there in the chat box. So you can write to her for accessing any kind of material that we just showed it to you. Okay, before we close, if you have taken note of that email ID, can we close for the day? Right, we could do that. Thank you, everyone. We'll meet once again tomorrow at 10 a.m. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Bye, Ritesh. Thank you. Bye, Rabia.
Thank you, sir.